Call the Assembly Committee of the Whole for February 24th, 2025 to order. Ms. Atkinson, would you do the land acknowledgement for us, please?
We would like to acknowledge the City and Borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Binish.
Madam Clerk, would you please note the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All members are present with Mr. Kelly on Zoom.
Very good, thank you. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll note the agenda as approved. Any changes to the February 12th, 2024 and March 11th, 2024 Assembly Committee of the Whole minutes? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. We're into our first agenda topic, the Huna Totem Corporation doc presentation and discussion, as well as the ordinance. We have a memo from Manager Kester, just kind of outlining kind of the steps that I'm envisioning for this this topic. We've received public testimony and presentation. My thoughts are we would ask questions of Huna Totem, Yorba Jensen, Marine Exchange, anything regarding traffic study, navigability. We also have a member from the Coast Guard here. We have staff. We'll do questions. Then we can get into amendments. They can be conceptual in nature. I think it's also good for us to, knowing that, this ordinance has not been introduced yet, so it'll still have to be introduced, and then there'll be public hearing where we could, of course, do amendments again. But it might be good for us to, if you have an idea conceptually, to float it to the body to, see if staff should go through the effort of drafting it. But if there's agreement on a conceptual amendment, that can be written into the revised ordinance before introduction. Manager Kester, anything?
At the committee's discretion, I just will like to kick things off going over the memo on page 14 of the packet.
Very good.
Awesome, thank you. So first I'd like to note that there was mention of the navigability study and the traffic study at the Lands, Housing and Economic Development Committee meeting. Those are both included in the online packet. We have limited printed copies just because they are hundreds of pages long. So please go there if you're looking for those documents. Before you tonight is a draft ordinance authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute a lease for CBJ submerged tidelands. The resolution that accompanies this ordinance authorizes us to apply to the state for the state's tidelands. We want to have one lease that encompasses state tidelands and city tidelands. Huna Totem has expressed an interest in only dealing with one landlord. And so we will be applying for that lease just as soon as that resolution passes. We do know that sometimes it takes quite a bit of time for those to get processed through DNR, although I know Huna Totem has been very active. We did try to initiate an application early, just to try to get the ball rolling, but the state really wanted to have the Assembly's formal commitment to the project, which is understandable before they did that work. So those are the two pieces of legislation you see before you. They're in draft form. They haven't yet been assigned a number, assuming that you will, have changes to them at tonight's meeting, but we really wanted to give you something to start with. To that end, our recommendation is to aim for final adoption at the April 28th Assembly meeting. This gives you two committee of the wholes, if needed, to talk about it. Of course, if you feel comfortable moving more quickly than that, you may. I want to also emphasize that the ordinance authorizes me to negotiate a lease and includes essential terms and conditions. There are many things that will be included in a lease document that aren't included in this ordinance that are kind of normal course of business things, but we don't have the full lease document before you. That will be something that is negotiated between Huna Totem and city administration. And unless I get different direction from the body, we will wait until we have possession of both the state tidelands and the CBJ tidelands to sign that lease, right? We can't sign a lease for something we don't don't own. However, if the body wants to amend that timeline, we've kind of been trying to brainstorm creative ways to be able to do that. So I anticipate we may get that question. Just want to summarize what's included in the ordinance. There was a lot of desire to capture things that were difficult to be forceful about as we talked through the assembly and the public in this process. And so those are included in intent language. There's intent language capturing the community's desire for year-round businesses. There is intent language to maintain negotiated agreements. And the reason why this doesn't say to limit it to 5 ships is because there are more negotiated agreements than the 5-ship limit, and we expect there will continue to be negotiated agreements that we will work with industry on. And important to note that we have other mechanisms to enforce our negotiated agreements, chiefly how we treat our docks and use our docks. It's also another whereas clause in the ordinance is the desire for shore power. That is also part of the CUP. And then the third, let's see. So those are the whereas clauses that are used, that are intent language. And I just am calling that out as intent language because I know that there's some, desire to make that, more perfunctory. And we have not, staff has not come up with a way to do that. So that is why you see those as whereas clauses. The more prescriptive element of the ordinance is the CUP that's included, that will travel with the ordinance. And so just to summarize, the conditional use permit that went through the Planning Commission requires construction of a seawalk. That seawalk includes minimum width requirements so that it is of the dimensions and standards of our seawalk that we have in existence, and that seawalk would be transferred to CBJ. It also requires installation of shore power at the expense of Huna Totem within 24 months when an appropriately sized power line is within 24 feet of the property line. Just want to note that at this moment, there is no power line that with that proximity to the project. And so part of, making sure that happens would probably need to be part of a holistic approach to shore power. CBJ, of course, is investing in shore power at our docks. We were the first community that partnered 30 years ago with a public-private partnership to invest in shore power, but I just wanted to highlight that given shore power is so important. Other elements of the CUP is that Huna Totem maintains their uplands, parks and landscaping, and that a navigability study and traffic study are required before the building permit is issued. One thing that the Assembly cannot do is remove items in the CUP, but you can strengthen items in the CUP or add conditions to the ordinance. And one example of this that staff in the draft ordinance before you today did is we strengthened the requirement for no lightering. So you'll see in the CUP it says that only small vessels can lighter, and we made that stricter and said you can only lighter if there is an emergency. So and that we felt like was reasonable. The term of the lease is 35 years. This is standard and of course can be renewed. And then the annual rental rate is fair market value. So Huna Totem, once they submit their meets and bounds, will have that property appraised. We don't have a value for that because that appraisal hasn't happened. We did note in the memo that we receive about $75,000 annually from the Franklin Dock Islands. I really don't know how that is comparable, but it gives you kind of a frame of reference. And these funds go to the Lands Fund, and the Lands Fund is used to promote housing projects, right? We use that to develop Peterson Hill, Telephone Hill, and those zoning and those types of projects. So those are the type of projects that the Lands Fund's used for. So I thank you for letting me go over that. There's a number of attachments also in your packet, including public testimony, a summary of public testimony, and again, I will draw you to the kind of bullets that Deputy Mayor Smith, that's in your red folder item, that Deputy Mayor Smith laid out just to try to guide conversation today. Of course, Visitor Industry Director Pierce is also here for any questions that you may have.
Good, thank you, Manager Kester. Okay, our next step is Assembly questions for our guests, proposers of the project, Coast Guard, as well as staff. Who has questions? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I got lots of questions. I'll start with staff just because they just touched on some themes that I was curious about. I understand why some concepts were included in as whereas, given that they're tricky, but of course they're important. Can you talk a little bit more about the purpose of whereas clauses? What does including those terms there do for us over the long term?
Thank you, through Deputy Mayor. So whereas clauses are fully intent language, I anticipate the next question is, what do we want to do if we want to strengthen them? They would go into terms and conditions if you want them to be binding. But what intent language does is it helps when we negotiate agreements with anybody going forward. So it'll help us with the cruise ship industry to say, this is what our assembly wants, which is reflective of what the community wants. This is why we're asking for what we're asking. This is why we're putting these extra terms and conditions in. It gives us that history, that kind of legislative history of what's important to you and to our community.
Ms. Atkinson.
Deputy Mayor, this is also for staff. I've heard a lot of concerns, some tonight and also as this process has gone forward, about making sure that the MOUs with the cruise industry are honored, and they are in our whereases, but I was hoping if someone could elaborate on the levers that we as a city have to pull to make sure that those MOUs are honored in the future.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Atkinson, through the Deputy Mayor. The biggest lever that we have to ensure that the MOUs are honored is our docs. And for example, for 2026, we made some changes to the schedule to ensure that we had days that stayed under our limits, that we were maintaining our limits. And I believe that we will continue to do that moving forward, because we do own 2 facilities in downtown Juneau. We can make decisions based on what we currently own. That's also why it was important to remove lightering entirely from, except for in case of an emergency. There was a very valid point about marine disasters and that being the best point of egress for an accident, and that's very valid. But that was why we removed lightering. That was why we strengthened some of the conditions that the Planning Commission placed, because we want to ensure that this is one ship, and that we're not inadvertently creating a situation where we're somehow in conflict with Huna Totem. We don't believe that's to be true now. Everybody's working together, but trying to set things up effectively for our successors, that we understand that that this development supports CBJ's limits and doesn't add to the overall capacity of the port.
Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also for staff, staying on that theme, my question is for Ms. Wright. You just clarified that we can add conditions to the CUP or strengthen them, and then they would travel with that, lightering as an example. No takeaways. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference between if someone proposes a conceptual limitation or condition tonight, what would dictate what is going on the CUP and traveling with that versus going into the terms and conditions as you described with the actual lease agreement?
Sure, through the chair. So the CUP is not changing at all. It's just going to be a document that we attach to everything, and it'll go along. That'll always be a baseline of what the Planning Commission agreed to, or what their notice of decision looked like. In regards to what we're doing tonight, your conceptual amendments or any additions that you wanted, if you wanted to move a whereas clause into a solid term or condition, you would let us know, and I would draft up terms and conditions that can then be put into that section. We're not going to touch the CUP, but it's a whole document that's being interpreted. So you start with that CUP, and if you add something on top of it, it'll be in the terms and condition. Does that make sense?
Follow up, so sort of, but I also think you might be misunderstanding me. So if I'm not doing an add-on on something, the CUP, I have my own crazy idea and I'm saying, here's my weird limitation you have to do for the doc.
Yeah.
That's gonna go in the terms and conditions, not be anything to do with the CUP, is that correct?
That's right. It's going to
Okay.
go in the terms and conditions. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Mayor Weldon.
Oh, thank you. Then I'll actually ask our guests a question. And I asked this before you guys started with your public process. Your 3 public meetings, what did you change in your plan from those meetings?
Well, and Susan Bell, thank you, Mayor Weldon. You have asked that and asked us to be prepared for that. And I was hoping that in the slide that I shared in the Lands Committee showing that public involvement has helped shape the project throughout. And then it's been, from the Seawalk to the park to the, now a number of amenities that people have suggested that we incorporate into the public spaces and the use that I was responsive to that question. Because again, the public process for the life of this, last 5 years is Hunatotum, first NCL and now Hunatotum has been responsive to that and really wanting to have this, the year-round use, the educational use, the multicultural reflection in the culture center. While Tlingit culture is part of Hunatotum in this community, there were things that I didn't read everything on that slide, but there are good ideas that we can fold into our operations, fold into our design, and also from as we were in that public process, the navigability study, the dock location itself has been adjusted from 1.5 years. So I was hoping that slide and any questions that we answered tonight were really showing that public input has been very meaningful throughout.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I guess my questions are somewhat in follow-up to the testimony that we just heard in the Lands Committee. There was some concern that people had over an increase in traffic. But I just wanted to confirm, either through Ms. Pierce or the author of our traffic study, that both in our waters and on land, assuming that we still have that we're able to enforce the 5-ship limit, we're not expecting an increase in traffic, but to manage it differently. Would that be correct?
Ms. Bell or anyone on the team?
I'm going to ask Corey Wall to speak to the traffic study, but I also just wanted to share for the assembly members, we added a 4th person to the expertise at the table, and this is Sean Shosted from P&D Engineers. He's been involved in the geotech in the uplands, the navigability study, other aspects of the project, and P&D Engineers will be creating the lease exhibits and coordinates that are needed for both city and state. So I hadn't explained who's to my right, Sean, and now Corey.
Thanks. So through the chair, thank you, Mr. Kelly. The traffic impact analysis is to talk to DOT about potential impacts to their intersections and their roadways. And so the traffic impact analysis doesn't exactly forecast what, like, I might think happens to traffic, but it's to show what could happen to the intersections to make sure that the intersections are still going to function with this development. And so for the purposes of the traffic impact analysis, yes, we're absolutely showing a large increase in large is subjective, but we are showing a increase in vehicle traffic for the purposes of this study. So if you have my executive summary, I tried to kind of highlight stuff out of this 200-page traffic impact analysis report. And on the third page of my executive summary, I kind of tried to bold and underline what the TIA is saying. Again, for the purposes of this analysis of the intersections. And what we're saying, the last line of table 11 shows anticipated vehicle traffic increases of 294 vehicles in the peak morning hour and 341 vehicles in the peak PM hour. There's also a slight reduction because, of course, we're saying that there's a 5-ship limit. So conceptually, right, the ship is just moving from one port to the other, but that's not what we did in the TIA. So in this kind of long paragraph, the decreases for moving the ship are far less than the increases that we're showing. So just as I talked about, we're talking about an increase in the PM, for example, of that 341. We're showing a decrease of 72 memories, or 74. So you can see that to analyze those intersections, we're not saying that we're just moving the traffic from one dock to another. We're saying we're actually increasing the amount of vehicle traffic on the roadways. Now, I think there's an argument to be made that that's not going to be true all the time, depending on what happens. Because, for example, when the Bliss is not doing a turnaround, a hot berth with the Encore, they're not going to have a massive amount of traffic coming from the AJ dock through downtown. So the decrease is going to be far more than just that 37. It's going to be all of those buses that were coming and going. But again, for the purpose of the TIA, we're definitely showing an increase, and a fairly significant one. And as I talked about in my previous testimony, it's still, all of the intersections are functioning at acceptable levels of service.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. In the navigability report that we received, it spoke to U.S. Coast Guard vessels, the buoy tenders going to the U.S. Coast Guard dock adjacent to this property. I understand that the Storis has never come to town, so there's no AIS traffic to show. But I did just I want to bring up the topic of what assurances can you give us that that ship will be able to dock downtown where the Coast Guard would like it to be?
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, actually, it's a good question. The Storis is a very unique vessel. I'm familiar with it because it's involved in the shell operations, and I've talked to people who have operated that vessel and have been handling that vessel over the years. It's a very versatile vessel because it's designed for anchor handling and towing vessels in the shell operation. Am I still talking? I'm agreeing. Okay. Anyway, I'm still talking. Yeah. But and so it has 7 propulsion units. If you can imagine that, like there's 3 propulsion units in the forward end of the vessel. Normally, a Coast Guard vessel might have 1, if they have any, and it has 4 in the stern, 2 main propulsion units with controllable pitch propellers and a quart nozzle configuration, and then they have 2 other thrusters. So that allows the vessel to dynamically position in Arctic waters or the port of Juneau, and it can actually move sideways in a 40-knot wind and control it. It can control any way it wants to go. It's dynamic positioning. So sometimes you see a vessel anchored out there in the middle of the harbor and doesn't go anywhere, but there's no anchor down. It's dynamic positioning. So it has that capability, dynamic position. So it could actually just come in sideways. It's a highly maneuverable vessel designed to be very maneuverable. I think the Coast Guard wouldn't have built it that way. They don't need that configuration, but they have one. It's highly maneuverable. So that'd be the most maneuverable vessel probably the Coast Guard has of anything of that nature size. Of course, small boats are very maneuverable, but so it's unusual in all the different unique propulsion units. There's plenty of space at dock. I'm not exactly sure we can look at that, but clearly 225-foot vessels and then room in between them adds up to 600-700 feet in that dock. And this is a vessel 360 feet long. So it could easily get in and out. Admittedly, most of us, when we're parking, we like to have as much space we can park so we have all the latitude to make mistakes. You don't have the luxury, you're going to have kind of a dead end at one point. And so you kind of have to watch that end, and then you have more space behind you, so to speak. I've come in that dock with the Coast Guard, too. I'm laid in that dock. So it's, so there's plenty of space there. And one of the issues right now, actually, the Coast Guard dock, why you don't see big ships tied up the Coast Guard dock is it's not substantial enough right now. The civil engineering folks say you can't put big ships there now. Therefore, the Coast Guard Healy, which is a 420-foot vessel, went to the Juneau dock, and he used 2 tugs. Part of the reason it's not that maneuverable, and these vessels don't call on port that often. And most of the time, it's seas. They're not constantly coming in and out of ports like a cruise ship is, with pilots who are very familiar. This mariners, that most of the time, are steaming through open water, and every once in a while, they come to shore, and they stay there for a period of time. So as far as confidence, as far as the maneuver to and from that dock, even though the Huna Totem is next to it, adjacent, not encroaching, but next to it, a little less sea room, but they have plenty of other room available to them. And I hope that answers your question.
Very good. That does. I'm going to follow up with one, and that's just, could you let me know or let us know the conversations you've had with the Coast Guard regarding, again, access to their kind of desired porting areas?
They have access to their, I'm sorry, to the Huna Totem?
Yeah.
Well, my understanding is that, and I wasn't there for the meeting, but the Coast Guard representative, and I heard from a couple different folks in headquarters, when they met, they saw it very attractive to be able to tie the stores on one side of the Huna Totem dock, because that would save them extraordinary expenses to rebuild their Juneau dock, which is adequate for the smaller vessels, but not for a large vessel, and it's going to be years out as far as getting that work done. They have a lot of big backlog of dock projects. So that's intriguing to them to be able to lease or have access to that dock. Plus, it's a floating dock, which is much easier for a cutter to tie up to. You don't have to adjust you got 20-foot tidal range. You got to constantly adjust your gangway all the time. And this is just stabilized. You set it, and it's good to go. So it is very attractive to them at the moment. And so, in my understanding, I don't want to speak for Huna Totem, but they seem to be okay with that.
I'll add a few comments just on Coast Guard communication, because that's something that's been going on throughout the couple of years that Huna Totem has had possession of the property and been working on it. And Russell Dick has led a lot of that. We've had communications here locally and in DC, and as we mentioned, that just as recently as last week. So there's been multiple facets. One of them is just understanding the project. Two, where there are adjacent properties, and even the Coast Guard dock encroaches onto the land, and that's something that Corey has been working with, because we need to be sure we fully understand not only the dock face, but just if there's other things that as we get into construction we need to know. So adjacent property, and then also the navigability study. In addition to just keeping teams updated, Marine Exchange has reached out to the Coast Guard to tell them, about the navigability study, and we are formally inviting them to the simulations that were previously mentioned, March 18th to 20 in Ketchikan at the UAS facility. If they're not able to participate, then we'll certainly make that report available to them as well. They also have a lot of authority in the permitting process. So again, it's just, it's been ongoing. It's intensive right now because of the navigability study. And they will be part of the federal agency review, and will have a lot of authority and input then.
Madam Mayor, follow up on this as well.
So I'm glad we're talking about this, because again, this is something that I've said from the very beginning, that we weren't going to take your assurances that the Coast Guard was happy, that we wanted to hear from the Coast Guard that they were happy. And it's interesting that you said that they were willing to tie up to your dock, because they told us in a meeting we had that your dock wasn't skookum enough for them to tie up to your dock. So we would like to hear that there is no problem with an icebreaker coming into their dock or our dock, because we just had one tied up to it, because that's the icebreaker coming into town is much more of an economic draw than a cruise ship dock, to be quite frank. And so we want to hear from the Coast Guard, and I understand there's somebody here, which you can't write in pen that you agree, but we'd like to hear what you have to say, if that's all right with the chair.
Speak up into the mic.
I've learned, Chris Kutu, I'm an attorney with the Coast Guard, and I've been a point of contact for Huna Totem, I guess maybe since towards the end of last fall. I have learned a couple things from this meeting and last, is that it's not a great place for a person who's hard of hearing. So I can hear about half the words that have come across, so bear with me. You're right, Mayor. I'm not here to say the Coast Guard is signing off on this project. I'm here to say that Huna Totem has been reaching out to the Coast Guard in an attempt to seek collaboration with the Coast Guard on this project. And as of last week, Huna Totem was able to coordinate with the folks at headquarters to start the process of running the project through and getting the waterways assessment done. Part of that process is reviewing the navigability study that the Marine Exchange has done, and making that determination as to whether or not the stores is going to be impacted by this project. The Coast Guard did express, some interest in docking at the facility. That was something that was expressed from Mr. Dick at the meeting last week, and the Coast Guard was, there's the headquarters folks and district folks, this is not their purview, but the folks at headquarters would be interested in learning more from. And so that's, I can't say that the ball is rolling with the Coast Guard now. There's collaboration between the Coast Guard. There's been some expression for MOUs, but there won't be an MOU with the Coast Guard, but it's not needed. The Coast Guard will provide Huna Totem a letter of cooperation, and an individual at the Civil Engineering Unit will be identified as a point of contact for the company to be able to corral up the right information to provide to the company and then to the city. So any additional questions I try and answer.
On this topic or something else on this one? Ms. Candies.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I apologize for the sound system in here. So you just said a letter of collaboration, or perhaps I didn't hear you, but I understand that you can't thumbs up this for the Coast Guard, and there's different groups of Coast Guard people we're talking to, but it sounds like there's points of contact and it's moving positively. Is there a document? Could you talk about that process just a teeny little bit about, I guess I'm just trying to understand where that conversation, besides being positive and underway between the company and the Coast Guard, is, if there's like a final document. Basically, I think a lot of us want, maybe something that's not possible, but we want to know, we would put the icebreaker over the cruise ship dock just for a variety of reasons. So we don't want to approve something if it's going to interfere with the icebreaker.
So based on the timelines I heard tonight, if the timeline for approval of a lease that's going to be negotiated from the city to the Coast Guard, the Coast Guard's approval process and review process is going to go beyond that which has been discussed tonight. Once the point of contact is identified with the Coast Guard, which should be, I thought was hopefully going to be today, the individuals responsible for reviewing the project would come together and review Huna Totem's project, and then from there, there'll be a preliminary assessment as to whether or not the stores can come in or would be impacted by the designs that's there. There's also a waterways assessment study that is done in accordance with, concurrently with the Army Corps of Engineers as well. And that is a piece of paper or a document that the Coast Guard will submit to them for their permitting. But as far as the city is concerned, that is something that the Coast Guard can, I may be speaking out of turn, but it could do for the city in order to provide them an assessment of the project, so that if the city is hinging their decision on, for this lease on the Coast Guard's decision, that may be something that the point of contact can provide to the city to do that. But it's not something that's typically done, but it may be able to be done in this case if that's something that folks are looking for. But the timeline for review is not by this April 18th deadline that Ms. Kester has said, or the body is concerned. I don't think it's going to be done that quick.
Very good. Ms. Wall, your question.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. While we have Mr. Kutu here, another question for someone from the Coast Guard, slightly different. When I read the navigability study, it was pretty clear that if you've got a 5 large ship limit, that docking a large cruise ship on a new dock would provide a lot of benefit over having one that is anchored in the middle of the channel. However, we don't know what the future holds, but it seems to me, my understanding is the Coast Guard can say, no, a sixth ship could not come in if they deem it not safe. When I look at the pictures, it looks crazy that you would be able to put a sixth ship anchored in the middle of the channel when you've got 5 ships in our port. My understanding is it's the Coast Guard that had the authority to say no. Does the Coast Guard, when you look at our port, do you think the Coast Guard would allow a 6th ship to anchor when there are 5 ships at dock?
I don't, I don't know that answer. That's the waterways folks at the sector will make that assessment based on the study.
Ms. Atkinson, another question?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Also on the navigability study, but not directly related to the Coast Guard. At Lands today, we did hear a few concerns regarding the study. And, in reading it, I saw things like, recommendation for a temporary tidal sensor at the location. And so I guess, Mr. Page, I just wanted to get your opinion, do you feel that we have a full picture now, or do you think we have more data is necessary before we're confident in navigability study? Sure.
I think the pilot earlier mentioned the need to do some more, and that was not the complete assessment. There are some pilots think that's all we need, and other pilots think we need more. What we do as a practice, and our next step is to get a simulator lined up, which we have already down in Ketchikan, University of Alaska, has a maritime simulator where you go through a variety of scenarios with different ships, come to the dock under different weather conditions, 30-knot winds, willow, you name it, currents, 2 knots, in different directions. So basically look at different scenarios, and that helps you develop a go, no-go situation, which is done to other docks. Say, if it gets 25 knots in that direction, we're not going to come to the dock. And that's something the captains use that. As far as we did a study on a simulator, and we realized it gets kind of gnarly, and we're not too comfortable, and therefore we're not going to do it. So what happens, we have ship captains from Norwegian Cruise Line, and we have pilots, and myself will go down there to Ketchikan, and we'll run the simulator with the Bliss type vessel under different weather conditions, and they can feel comfortable that, okay, I can bring that in on these circumstances. Based on all the docks I've looked at and all the simulations, this is the easiest dock to come into in Juneau, and certainly for Skagway has a different issue, so to speak. And some pilots have said yes, therefore we don't need to do a simulator. Others think they should. That's fine. It's very subjective to some degree, but the simulator kind of clears up a lot of issues. So we're doing that next step. So we look at historical data. Now we're going to actually pretend we're driving a ship today in different circumstances, a variety of circumstances. Feel how comfortable we are bringing that in. So that's the next step to kind of wrap it up. The Coast Guard's not as concerned about that aspect of it because that's really more like a fender bender issue, like, hey, don't go, or might hit the dock. But they're more concerned about other navigational channels for other vessels or hazards, or potentially, like I talk about, float planes crashing, the boats, etc. That's more of that can interfere. It also can interfere with the anchorage. We talked about the 6 vessel criteria. Well, it's a safety zone already, and the Coast Guard did not allow other ships to anchor without permission from the captain of the port in that region. And they limit that to cruise ships anchoring in the port. So they already have some restrictions and limitations on vessels coming in the port. If you build this dock, if I was a captain of the port, and I've been a captain of the port in the past, I would say that kind of closed that option. We're not going to anchor anymore because that's just not safe anymore, other than smaller vessels or circumstances, emergency, and what have you. But basically, you're putting a big plug in the middle of everything, and it further complicates it with large ships. So that's how I see that they wouldn't change that scenario. I think they would stick with the criteria. Kind of agreement makes sense. As far as limiting, you look at it from the context of how much load you have as far as passengers perhaps, but there's also a navigational safety issue. If you put the stock there, there's advantages. You plug in, you'll have shore launches, etc. The disadvantage, you're going to take that anchorage really out of play. It's not really, not for large ships anyway. So hopefully that answers some of those questions.
Ms. Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Follow up kind of on that, you were talking about the simulator and how you really dial it in once you look at what it would be like. In the report, it says that experience obtained will help inform the preferred orientation of the dock if built. So how different within this sphere, I guess, based on when you do that extra work, could the orientation be? We looked at lots of graphics and we've overlaid the general. So are we talking like teeny inches, millimeters?
Well, not inches, no.
Yeah.
And I'm not that comfortable millimeters for that matter, but basically,
Micromillimeters.
it's like 5 degrees. But we've really kind of nailed it down, talking to pilots and P&D engineering, and just looking at it's really going to be driven by the prevailing winds. And we're looking at prevailing winds and limit the amount of force it places on the vessel. So that's really kind of, in some ways, it probably might a little bit more of a certain way, but then you kind of encroach in other problems. You build other problems. So if you got too close to the Coast Guard, that's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And so we really kind of reached consensus. It's pretty much in the middle, but we can confirm that. So we had this bandwidth of maybe 20 degrees, if that, maximum. And we've narrowed it down to pretty much down to within the 5 degrees.
And I can add a little bit on that too. We've also done a wind and wave study, or are wrapping up a wind and wave study that we started for this project about 4 years ago, and are just kind of updating it based on 5 more years of data that's come in. So it's the location is, prioritizing giving the Coast Guard as much room as we can while not getting too broadside to the weather, and also not encroaching on the AJT dock next door. So like Ed said, we kind of landed in the middle, giving everybody as much room as possible without getting too crosswise to the prevailing winds. So the simulation is pretty fine tuning things. We looked at a total of about 30 degree swing from coming basically straight down parallel with Whittier Street, and then rotated it, I think 30 degrees towards the AJT dock. And the further you go towards the AJT dock, the worse the weather is. So this is where we landed. I think that the simulation is a matter of degrees, single digit degrees, probably less than 5 degrees if it changes at all.
Thank you.
Very good. Madam Mayor, did you have another question?
On that topic?
Okay. Other topics? Ms. Hall? No other questions on that topic. We can go to the next one. Ms. Hall, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I'm not sure if this would be directed to staff or to Hunatotum, but I know discussion of a circulator. And, this kind of came up as our public testimony in lands, the business owner that talked about the ability to drop off and pick up at the dock. And I thought, if we ever do get a circulator, will they also be able to access, use that as a point to pass through as well? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer that question. Part of, we were asked to consider if we were doing a traffic, what's the word? A circulator. I'd simulated my brain, circulator. And we also knew there was a time in this process that the city examined that as well. And having looked at both the pedestrian access and the vehicular access, we're not planning on a circulator because the pedestrian distance from the dock location into Marine Park is the same distance as South Franklin into the tram area. And even within that, we've got many attractions and retail opportunities. So again, we believe based on the traffic study and also that distance, that pedestrians will disperse at multiple intersections and make their way into our downtown core. So we're not planning on operating it. If someone does choose to, whether it's public or private, we can work that into how we operate the facility.
Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And just to add on to that regarding the circulator study that was conducted when about half of this assembly was around. The assembly opted not to fund the circulator project at that time. We still do have the study. It's only a couple of years old. It's still relevant. And it did show the option for stopping at the Huna Totem Dock. That was one of the proposed locations. You know, again, opted not to fund it, but that study still does exist. And I did want to just add on to the last question, because I have the mic and I was a little bit remiss in answering Ms. Atkinson's question about the limits. And I wanted to add that not only is there the draft provision for no lightering, we also control the only lightering facility in Juneau currently. The Franklin Dock has a prohibition on lightering in their lease. It would be really difficult to lighter to the AJ Dock and kind of just based on the other uses that they have going on there. So I think we can be pretty confident that a prohibition on lightering at this dock and one on the Franklin Dock would make it very difficult for a ship, whether at anchor or dynamic positioning out in the channel, to get their people to shore.
Very good. I had a question related to the access piece. Someone I thought during public testimony brought up, you know, if there's a company that isn't, well, they mentioned contracted with you, but I could imagine being contracted with a, you know, a cruise line or a vessel that is at your dock. Could you speak to, you know, limitations on access for non-contracted companies, or really all other companies or vendors?
I'd be happy to. And we've been talking with Serene, who testified earlier from Juneau Tours, about her interest. We've also obtained a copy of the operating agreement that South Franklin has, just to look at what that looks like, because our, you know, Huna Totem's experience in Huna is a little bit different. Operators that are not directly contracting with the ships do have access to the site. So I think we've got to look at good examples. We've got to think about the needs, and then also make sure that that everything works smoothly. But we are talking with Serene and others who are very interested in accessing the site to serve Juneau clients. And we will have attractions that we do hope, including the cultural center, that bring people from the other docks. So we're working through that as we're thinking about our operating plan. And if I can indulge briefly, one thing that, while I was focusing on the navigability study, I had the pilots in that category, Madam Mayor. The pilot participation in the open house was really active. We had a number of pilots, both in the afternoon, evening, and daytime session. And when we came back from that, it's when we committed internally and began investigating the simulation. I had it in too small of a box.
Be good. Madam Mayor, another question.
Yep, well, thank you for that. And then this is a question, and I apologize, the traffic impact study is in our red folder, so we just got it, and I have not had a chance to read it. But referring to, I think, Ms. Marlowe's question, was it just passengers that you counted, or did you account for crew also?
So we tried to account for all of the traffic that would be generated on the site. So that's passengers off the ship, crew off the ship, and anybody coming and going to the upland facilities separately. So it counted everybody. And the way that we did that was looking at existing traffic coming off the cruise ships, both the Bliss and Encore counts that we did, and Dowell did several counts downtown. So that's everybody coming off, and all of the traffic that comes from that, whether it was crew or passengers. And then using DOT standards to evaluate the uplands, facilities, restaurants, museums, that kind of thing, to talk about total traffic.
Other questions, Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I also have traffic questions. Definitely recommend folks read it. I know we just got it, but it definitely threw me for a loop. And Mr. Wall, you did a really good job explaining why, which is that the purpose was to, from DOT's perspective, is to see, does this significantly make things worse for traffic? And which is a good thing to do, but one of the benefits of this project that has been proposed is, does it make congestion better? My understanding is, from what you said, is you all took a conservative approach and you said, we're not going to assume it's the same number of trips spread out. We're going to assume more trips from this fifth dock. which is challenging because it doesn't answer the question, does this make it less congested if we are not increasing trips? So my question is, can that be done? Can you change assumptions here and say, oh, we're just going to spread out the trips instead of increasing the trips so that we can look? Because right now it looks like you're not only increasing congestion to the north, which you would expect, you're also increasing congestion to the south, which I'm guessing is because we're increasing the number of trips.
Yeah, and again, sorry, Chair, it's important to realize that this is for DOT. That's what this report is for. And so by trying to talk about those sort of things, we're sort of twisting something that was for a purpose and trying to use it for a different one. So I can say, we did a lot of counts internally to try and understand what's going to happen with traffic on the site, what kind of widths we have to have for stairways, and all sorts of ways that we're going to be moving people and vehicles around on the site. So we have done a lot of work to go to the docks, count people, take measurements. We had 6 people at one point counting every person coming off the ship, leaving in cars, what direction they're going, and then circulating around at the AJ dock doing counts of the people that were queued up waiting for. We've done a lot of work. But DOT doesn't care about that. They're not interested in what I think, what I do as a non-traffic engineer. What they're interested in is what can be proven according to their standards in their handbooks, right? They're traffic engineers. And so this report, the reason that it's a little unsatisfying for some of your questions is just because its purpose is to talk about signalized intersections that DOT controls. So from my perspective, absolutely, we're going to greatly decrease traffic coming through the most congested part of town. That was the whole reason behind moving this facility out to Whittier to a signalized intersection, the only dock on a signalized intersection at Whittier and Egan. So we're getting rid of all of the traffic associated with this cruise ship or a cruise ship on South Franklin, right? So there's no longer the single lane conflicts with AML or people crossing across traffic, at that 2-lane intersection where you have all the retail right on a narrow street. Like, all of that gets better by taking a ship and moving it over. And, we're estimating, I think the capacity is 400,000 people moving, right, and being located at this facility in a much better part of town for all of the things that seem like it's the most problematic for downtown people. So, if it was me, I would have looked at what was happening on that turnaround, the worst time at the hot berthing on a Tuesday, and said, well, all that traffic is basically gone now. There'll be a trickle midday, but it's not going to be this massive congestion exactly when everybody's going. So you understand what I'm saying. So yes, there's going to be significant amounts of decreases of bus traffic and the people bus conflicts happening right where the lighters are coming in, right into the heart of downtown. Or I also think this whole, and I did want to say one other thing, that the circulator is being used in 2 different ways. So just to clarify, there's the study that CBJ did for a publicly owned circulator that would have brought people from the docks to various tour, like the City Museum and other points in downtown. That was called a circulator. In this report, I talk about a circulator, which is the buses and coaches at the AJ dock, which are just doing oval trips from the AJ dock to the tram, because it's over a mile for people to walk from the AJ dock to even get to the tram, much less to anything there. And so CLIA operates motor coaches endlessly circulating, and we call them the circulator in the report. They're just doing these routes, right? And so by moving our ship to the Auk Landing site, which is about 1/3 of a mile from Marine Park, we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be walking instead of needing to have a coach to take them till they can start their visit. So there's all sorts of things that make this much better, obviously much better, but it's very hard to quantify in a way that DOT would be interested in. So I kept on saying that to the Dell engineers, like, well, don't you think? And they're like, Dell does not care what your study did or what you think. They want stuff that can be proven according to their traffic handbooks. So I hope that answers that question.
Questions on this topic? Madam Mayor.
Thank you for that, Mr. Wallet. Certainly made more sense now, but there is some concern because as you have better egress, you have also better access. So is there any intention to be renting cars from your location? That would be an increase of cars that didn't happen before. And now that you have better access, I could see more Uber and Lyft going to your, and taxis going to your location. You want to talk to any of those?
Ms. Bell?
In terms of rental cars, we haven't factored that into our model. We don't plan on having a rental car vendor there. Uber and Lyft are a little bit different, and that may be, again, something we think about whether it's on Whittier or it comes into the site.
Very good. Questions on this topic or another?
Traffic.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. My question, as Madam Mayor said, we didn't get the traffic study, so I haven't, it sounds meaty and I gotta spend some time with it. And I might even ask you one-on-one to re-explain again what you said, because I understand it's trying to use it for one thing, but I'd love to see it quantified the other way. I talked with Mr. Russell about having a computer simulation to make me believe it, because I live downtown and I have some skepticism about it. But because that I have not seen that, you talk about the mitigation. These scores, according to their traffic handbook, are with mitigations described in that report. So could you just give me a little preview, or are they very beefy?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said in my testimony, none of the changes require a widening of any roads or significant changes to the hard structure, but it is going to call for probably the biggest recommended change that people would see is an elimination of the north crosswalk at 10th and Egan. So going across towards Marine Exchange on that side across Egan. And so that recommendation, I think, somebody was testifying that she was concerned about traffic queued up on the bridge. And so to help eliminate that queuing and ease the left-hand turn, the recommendation is that there would only be one crosswalk across Egan, and that would be on the south side. So for most people coming from the flats to go towards the Whale, fine, you just cross the street and go over. It would mean some inconvenience for a pedestrian if they were coming from the flats and trying to go to work at Marine Exchange, for example. So that's probably the biggest mitigation that's, again, being recommended to DOT, we're not prescribing that it must happen. The other things are going to be things like the split timing. So right now you have some signals that it's green and red coming this way, and they're recommending, it would be green both ways, that kind of a change. And then particularly at Whittier and Egan, some changes to right now, memory serves, the through lane is the left there, and and then it's going to do the left-hand turn at Willoughby. And so they're recommending changing that. What is the through lane, turn lane, as opposed to just the through lane is going to change. That's what they're recommending it there. I didn't explain that very well, but the mitigations are summarized, and I can certainly go through them in more detail. They're at the back of the report. So on page 26 of the report, the conclusions, it recommends these changes.
Great, thank you.
The mitigations there.
That's helpful. You need not go through them. I'll look at them.
Very good. I had a question on the Seawalk. I know one thing that has been brought up is obviously excited to extend the Seawalk through this area. I know a concern that is brought up is ensuring that the Seawalk isn't just funneling people into some shops. Like it has a flow for people who are just trying to walk through the site, and it doesn't feel pinched or constrained, or to be, honestly, just so it's not like the duty-free store in the airport kind of thing. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So the diagrams, and I think you've seen the site and first floor diagrams before. The intent is to have a seawalk all the way around the property. So as people approach, they're going to be coming down Heath Street, or they'll be coming down Egan to the property if they're walking to the site. And then there'll be the sidewalk down Whittier to the seawalk that goes between our property and the Coast Guard docks. That will be a seawalk width. It's not going to be any narrower. It's not going to have merchandising on it. And so that seawalk between the Coast Guard property and our property is just the 17 feet or perhaps 20 feet, depending on what we're going to do with code. But it's just the minimum recommended. But at the end, at the southwest corner, which is really sort of kind of the jewel of the whole property, it opens up to a big public deck. And so what we're hoping is that people are going to be drawn down. You know, we can't control what's happening on the Coast Guard site, so there's going to be a security fence between our property and the Coast Guard site. But where our property opens up, what we're calling the flagpole at that southwest corner, a much bigger deck with open seating, and we're working with landscaping right now to try and figure out how we can entice people to that spot. But no matter what, it's a big open deck over kind of location on that southwest corner. And then people can continue on the seawalk around the rest of the property. And that's just at grade. Then if we bring people up to the top of the property, like, you know, they're gonna be coming out the cruise ship up there, and we're gonna have big stairs, you know, both through the landscaping and up at the front of the site to try and get people up to the park. Then from there's all sorts of ways to wander through, particularly on the west and south sides where the views are, to walk around up at the top. Even though it's not exactly a seawalk, it's definitely public ways, a different experience, you know, to be up high, looking at the views, and we think it's gonna be pretty exciting, particularly because we're trying to, again, always bring that park down to Egan, all the way along the sidewalk at Egan to try and entice people to come up and just feel like a natural landscaping feature coming up off the ground there.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Kelly had a question.
Thank you. Yes, my question is also kind of related to the shops that would be in the center. There has been some concern expressed that about, you know, having something there year round. And you talked about having the cultural center there. I'm not sure if we've asked you this before, so if it's a repeat or if you have any updates, that's great. But have other businesses shown any interest in having year-round operations at your facility?
Thank you, through the chair. There's been a lot of interest in both retail and food and beverage prior to my arrival. And as we've increased the visibility of the project, people are calling. We haven't done any leasing yet. And part of that is just we need to update our costs and our business plan. And also we need to get through a critical milestone. There's been a lot of interest. We were delighted. Tracy Labarge told Juneau Empire KTOO she was very interested in year-round model for her business, which is only seasonal right now. And definitely, as Mr. Kelly said, that the Indigenous Science and Knowledge and Cultural Center, we're excited about the collaboration with SHI because of their deep involvement with the schools. And so, you know, it's a community attraction, a visitor attraction, and from at every level of our education, ways to bring school kids all the way to the university into the facility. So we know, I mean, it's something that people are seeing as an expectation from the assembly and the community. And so as people are seeing that, they're shaping their ideas, including a really interesting spa idea that, you know, has been contacted. But we've done no negotiations at this stage, but I think the public and assembly conversation is helping people shape their ideas.
Very well.
Thank you.
So with the sea walk, so if I'm coming from the whale statue, where am I coming through the property?
So right now what we're showing is that there is a seawalk that's going, there certainly is a 5-foot wide sidewalk along our property between our building and the property line on the west side. But because that's CBJ Tidelands, we have not obligated you to put the seawalk on your property as we wrap around that west side, because we're not exactly sure what you want to do with your tidelands. So either the seawalk would pick up along the front, the south end of CBJ Tidelands and connect over at Gold Creek, or the seawalk could continue on up to Egan, and so people would walk, they would walk along the seawalk to Gold Creek, they'd come up to Egan, down Egan, and then to our property through that way. Either way, it works well with the connections that we've got at our site. So what we tried to do is right at that sort of knuckle at the south end of the CBJ Tidelands is where we put the big grand stairs going up to our park and the elevators going up to our park. And so if the seawalk comes at the front of your property over to that location, that's a great spot for people to go up. Or if they're going to continue all the way back to Egan and the seawalk doesn't ever get built at the front of your tidelands, it still works for people to come down the Egan sidewalk, and then there'll be nice ramps and ways up to the park or down along our site to that, again, that kind of flagpole spot at the seawalk level.
That was very confusing without a picture. So I have no idea what you just told me. But let's just say the lease was approved and I wanted to walk from the whale along the water until I hit the Coast Guard, and then we'll have to figure that out. It kind of goes along with Mr. Smith's question. How do you ensure that it's unobstructed? You mentioned seating and that stuff. You know, this is one of the local things that the locals love is the seawalk. So how do we ensure that they're not walking through tables and chairs, lines waiting for food? Do we delineate it by lines, paw prints, whatever we need to make sure that there's a 16 to 20 foot passageway?
So, yeah, right now we're working with landscaping to design the park at the back end. You know, we just really started design as this project has become more and more, seems like maybe it's going to move forward. There's been more money able to be spent on design. So right now we have site workshop, the landscape architects are really starting to work on the park. And so, yes, we're working on having, you know, the routes through the top of the site as well. But so again, I think the question, there's a big swath of property that we don't own between Gold Creek and our west property line. And so I'm not exactly sure how to answer how people will come from the whale to our site just because we don't own that property. You guys own that property. So if you build a seawalk out in the water, like you've done on the other side of Gold Creek, they're going to come right to our site, and then there'll be a seawalk that goes all the way around. If you don't, and people walk down Egan, then there'll be a seawalk that comes down this way, either up at the park or down at the seawalk level. Again, all the way around our property, unimpeded, without going through any buildings, without going through any sort of retail shops. You know, there's no intent of doing anything kind of unusual. It's going to be straight lines of retail shops, canopy, seawalk, down at the ground level. Up above, we're kind of putting the buildings in some different locations to kind of do some interesting things with the way people are going to traverse through the site and give some good retail opportunities. But that won't stop just somebody who wants to be on a bike or wants to be walking on a seawalk down at the seawalk level.
Ms. Bell.
There are minimum width requirements in the conditional use permit as well. And so we will comply with that. Also, we've, in our communication with Mayor, with Alex, and with others, we're happy to coordinate on the design and construction of that section that we don't own so that it's seamless and there's some efficiency.
Ms. Spears.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Since we are the landowner of the adjacent tidelands, if this project moves forward or this ordinance moves forward, the subsequent step would be having a discussion at the assembly level about whether, you know, it's timely now to initiate another seawalk project and what type of provisions might be included and how it would interface with Hunatotum's development.
So there's been some concern about widths of sidewalks in front of the site. And so just right before I came to this meeting, I took out the tape measure and just looked at things again. But that sidewalk from Whittier going towards the whale is about the largest sidewalk in town. It's almost 8 feet wide, that whole swath along Egan going to where you can get onto the seawalk past Gold Creek. So I don't think that we're dependent on you guys building a lot of infrastructure in order to get significant amount of pedestrians over onto the seawalk system that's already built past Gold Creek. So even if, you know, this is a long time coming for that connection between the Hunatotum parcel and the Gold Creek connection, there's still adequate ways for for tourists to get, walkers to get off of our site, down Egan and towards the Whale.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Well, first, I'm going to thank everyone for not indulging us, but participating in this really important conversation. I know it's taken 5 years, but that was well spent to get us to this level of questions that I think we've been curious about. This is a question for staff. I was, of course, if there's a lease put in place, Hunatotum will be paying fair market value for that lease. I was shocked by how low the fair market value is for this property that we know will bring in significant revenue. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that is determined? I know that Tidelands in the middle of somewhere else may not be worth a lot, but here they're going to be worth a lot. So where does that number come from?
Thank you, Madam Wall, and through the Deputy Mayor. It would come through an appraisal. So it's typically how we determine fair market value. The property is appraised, and we use the appraised value.
So sometime in between, if the assembly passes an ordinance and then documents are signed, there would be an appraisal of that parcel.
That is correct.
Mrs. Yandes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up conceptually, so when we've looked at on land transactions with citizens, we have in our code, sometimes we want to do less than fair market value and we can't unless we do something to remove that piece of code. So given that this is going to be a bespoke lease agreement, are we constrained by that appraisal, or could you say this is what we're charging for these tidelands because we think they're worth a lot? Are there legal limitations is what I'm asking.
Through the chair. So the baseline is fair market value. You can go higher than that.
Great, just wanted to confirm that.
Mayor Weldon.
I'm not sure if this question is for staff or for Hunatotum. So we're going to talk about shore power. And I'm looking at the conditional use permit, and it says the dock owner will at their own expense provide shore power within 24 months after an appropriate sized power line is within 25 feet of the property line. Which side of the property line is at 25 feet? That could be a really expensive piece of 25 feet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through the chair, Port of Seattle did recently run a submarine cable to provide shore power, so that is a thing. I will not entirely speak for the Planning Commission, but I will assume that the idea was that power would be run from the bridge area, which is, I believe, the closest location to get power from to supply shore power to this facility.
Mayor Weldon, follow up.
So I guess my question is, why does it just say property line instead of within 25 feet?
Through the chair, Madam Mayor, that was a condition that the Planning Commission placed and was not a recommendation of the staff here today.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. This question would be for the attorney, and it kind of is a follow-up to the earlier question about fair market value being kind of the baseline for how what would we be required to negotiate. If there was a certain activities or behaviors that we didn't want to mandate in the lease, but that we wanted to incentivize, would it be appropriate to attach conditions under which the lease payment might be reduced.
Through the chair, so if there are particular items that you wanted to incentivize, you could provide conditions that say you will give discounts for certain things to that lease or discounts for certain conditions that are being met by Huna Totem. Yes.
Thank you.
Senator.
So follow up on the question about shore power. So we've heard a lot of concerns about the, speed at which we'll be able to get power that close to the dock and get to the point where the dock could be electrified. I think a lot of those concerns come from the kind of environmental impact of having ships in town. So I don't know if this is a question for staff or folks from Huna Totem. Can you speak to the environmental impact of switching a ship from, being anchored out in the channel to just being at dock without shore power?
Ms. Bell.
Listen, thank you for the question through the chair. It is something that we've emphasized in a lot of our prior communication is that getting, first of all, there's 59 ships in the schedule this year for ships at anchor, 80 plus for 2026. So it's a significant volume, but getting ships from anchor to a dock means that all of that, all of that extra engine work and emissions related to keeping the position in place is eliminated. So that's a benefit right there before shore power. We're not discounting our responsibility to build shore power, but for very large vessels, I mean, we've even used the phrase up to 40%, but I think that in this community, I don't know that we would have a ship of that size, but again, it's a significant reduction in that first step. And then shore power, if I can just add on, as was just discussed, there's some specific expectations in terms of distance and time frame that was in the conditional use permit, but we're going beyond that. We've been talking with AEL&P, both Alec Mesdag and his team about the mechanics, about the long lead times, about the cost to understand that. And Corey, as he continues to build the team, Ben Haight, who spoke earlier, we're working on understanding what, more detailed engineering around what that cost, timeline, and sequence would be. So we can figure out, just the right order and get shore power to the property. It is a complex landscape, and I know Alec emailed the assembly about that and made himself available too. Oh, and then also there are emission reductions from back to the anchor, ships at anchor. There's emissions and fuel consumption from the lightering. I think one of the most impactful visuals that Marine Exchange had in the prior iteration and in this navigability study is what some people have called the purple haze, but that just, that spirograph of those, lightering vessels. But again, there's a lot of environmental impacts as well as safety impacts when you get that ship from anchor to a dock.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. This is, I believe, my last question for the evening. One of the
Yeah, we'll see.
This is for Huna Totem. One of the things that we as a city have been working towards, and we've had success, there's always more work to do, is greater authority and collaboration on scheduling. And I know that is moving pieces with many different partners, and Huna Totem will not be in control of everything, and we're going to need you to be good partners with us to meet our goals if you are to own a dock here. What does that look like to you? What does kind of working with CBJ and good collaboration look like for scheduling that helps us reduce congestion and meet our goals?
Ms. Bell.
Through the chair. Well, I recognize there's also multiple players in the scheduling mix as well. And, for many years, we've had cruise line agencies doing that past with Juneau's, daily caps and the 5-ship limit, and other communities doing that. We definitely see the city, each municipality involved in that. And so, I think we want this to be successful, will be cooperative, but I think that those first conversations are, lines with cruise line agencies and lines with the municipalities and figuring out how we can solve problems. We've asked Norwegian Cruise Line, since they're going to be an anchor tenant. If in the foreseeable future, if they think from a scheduling standpoint, we still will look at these 2-ship Tuesdays. I think that's another thing. Several of us were at a cruise conference in Vancouver several weeks ago. There's a lot of factors. There's new entrants in the market. MSC Cruise Lines is one of them. Some people are going to have to be more flexible than weekend departures. So there's multiple players, multiple factors. We want to be part of that and part of the solution.
Ms. Euskienis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a follow-up on Mr. Kelly's question about lease mechanisms. I think, used the word discount. So is that a fairly flexible measure for incentive if you're doing a carrot or a stick? Probably could get complicated really quick, and we wouldn't want to use that willy-nilly, but you could incentivize behavior, like if X, then the rate is Y, or similarly, like if no X, then Y.
Through the chair, that's correct. I
Okay.
agree that we shouldn't get too complicated
Yeah.
on that. But yes, if there's certain behaviors that you would like to incentivize or not have happen, we could work something out in how we present the language.
Okay, thank you. And because my last question was for staff, I just want to thank you all for really providing this level of detail. And it's been a lot of questions.
Manager Kessler.
I just want to add that the logistics would matter because with a lot of the items with this lease, enforceability does become a concern, right? The enforceability. So I just would like to make sure we are thoughtful about how any of that's applied, and would like the opportunity to talk through that with staff to make sure that while it's legal, is it actually doable?
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I guess I did have a couple more questions, but I think so we is getting away to maybe prioritize. I was encouraged to read in the memo that the funds that we collect from the lease would go into housing. I didn't see that specifically mentioned in the ordinance. I was just wondering how that would work, and what we would have in mind for those funds once we receive them.
Manager Kessler.
Yeah, unless directed otherwise by the assembly, the funds would go into the lands fund like all other revenue received in the lands fund. For example, when we sell a parcel of land, we're managing pits and quarries, all of those, items go into the lands fund and pay for our lands division. So it pays for 3 staff people, soon to be 3 staff people. And the activity of the lands division is primarily developing city land per assembly goals. Now, that's certainly not the only thing they do. They do other things like monitor air quality and other items. So unless otherwise specified, the funds would just go into the lands fund and be used as part of that separate enterprise fund that is the lands fund.
Very good. Mr. Kelly, I'd say if you have questions on, potential amendments or something, we can hold those, but if you had additional questions on that you'd like to have answered, continue.
I think I can hold off for now.
Very good. Any other questions for the assembly, from the assembly? Very good. Let's take a 10-minute break before we come back and consider amendments and changes on things. 7:57. All right. I bring the Assembly Committee of the Whole back to order. So we've asked questions from Hunatotum and their support contractors and staff. I've heard some desire from, or positions from some of the members on the committee that maybe just needing a little more time for conceptual amendments or even to maybe even consider amendments. So, today's February 24th. The next committee of the whole is March 17th. I see a couple ways forward. We can introduce the ordinance at the March 3rd meeting as drafted, as presented, deal with amendments on the 17th, and then it would be up for assembly action on April 7th. That moves, anyway, we've heard in construction and time is money. There's that option, which I like. The other is to, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, right. Sorry. And then the other option would be to introduce on the 7th so hold this in committee till March 17th, introduce on the 7th, up for assembly action on April 28th, 3 weeks after the 7th. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Could we maybe do a little bit of hybrid of what you said? We'll introduce it, move it forward, and then if it does need to stay in the CAL, we don't get the amendments, we've still introduced it. Can we keep it in CAL with it been introduced? So that way if we have like a plan B if we can't get it sorted out in the first CAL.
Yeah, you see how much fun things I put on the agenda, so I would imagine, my plan would be to work them all through the CAL, kind of, no matter how long it took. But it's not a bad, that Mr. Bryson, that is an option. And then, of course, remember, people do have options at public hearing to introduce more amendments. Madam Mayor.
Because I can give my opinion on this. I would say let's consider those, but let's look at conceptual amendments first, because if there's a few of them, then that might be a pretty simple pace to go. But if there's several of them, we might have to wait. So I would just ask you to let that sit for a few minutes and not make that decision yet until we go over some conceptual things, because the attorney may have a say in how fast it can go.
Sure. Ms. Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand it's hard to figure that out with the scheduling, and we want to balance keeping it moving versus having enough time. I will say to the last comment, I'm not ready for amendments this evening. I talked to staff a long time ago, and then a lot of my questions tonight were, what is a universe of possibility? We've gotten a lot of ideas, even from the public, of potential amendments. So armed with the information I got today, then maybe I would be more ready for that. And I will say obviously the will of the body will prevail, but to introduce it right away, while keeping it in committee, my preference would be to not introduce it and just hold it in committee. I said that confusingly. I would prefer to keep it in committee and not introduce it as of yet, because it's super unfortunate, and I have much sympathy for the applicant who has been doing a lot of work, but some of the delay factors I do not feel like we've been sort of patiently waiting our turn for it to even get to the assembly to start talking about the meat, so we all have a lot of thoughts, but this is the first time that we're actually getting to engage with it as an assembly with the real policy of the Tidelands. And not an appeal that's dragged on or a pandemic that's dragged on. So that would be my preference.
Very good. Other perspectives on the time sequence, or shall we try a motion? I guess who doesn't even want to hear any conceptual amendments this evening? Okay. Madam Mayor.
So, my definition of conceptual amendment is, Madam Attorney, how do I do this? My conceptual amendments are not anything written out whatsoever. For instance, my very first one, and this is an example, and he can come back to me, is I'm concerned with a navigational study. Madam Attorney, how do we put in the navigational study that that has to be completed and the Coast Guard has to say it's okay to put an icebreaker there. How do we make that work? That would be my conceptual amendment. So I'm not trying to say hammer out the wording right now. I'm just saying, Madam Attorney, how do we make that possible?
And if the body's even in support of those type of concepts. Ms. Wall.
I don't want to vote on anything right now because I think that would take a lot of energy and thought. And so if we have more questions for staff or you want to flag things for the rest of the assembly, I'm fine doing that right now. But where I'm at is we can't make a lot of decisions without a lot of discussion. And so even a small thing that we have to vote on, I realize we're gonna have to vote how to get out of this conversation, but that's the only vote that that I'm feeling ready for myself.
Yeah. I guess what I'm kind of hearing and seeing is I have ideas for conceptual amendments. I can either write them up or present an idea and maybe work with staff and the project proposer to, anyway, just kind of, it would be perfect language for approval. Or it could be finalized language to bring back at the March 17th meeting. So I'm kind of feeling maybe not even bringing up the conceptual stuff right now.
If you're looking at me, I would disagree because I think the body should be hearing what other people are doing. We don't have to vote on them per se. I think what Mr. Smith was trying to say, we need to paint the dock pink and have flowers everywhere. Is the body even interested in that whatsoever? Those are what I think he's trying to get is, if the body isn't even interested in something, I can't come up with one anything, because of course you're all going to be very interested in all my conceptual amendments. But I think that's what he was saying when he was saying voting on, because there's nothing to vote on other than there's a concept, unless the concept is so far out there that we don't know what to do. For instance, I'm going to pick on Mr. Kelly. Sorry, Mr. Kelly. He was talking about what to do with the money. That's not for tonight. That's many months down the road if it even happens. So that would be if Mr. Kelly brought that as his conceptual amendment, I would say, no, that's further down the road in finance, actually, and not here. So, sorry, Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Bryson.
Mr. Chair, I kind of get what both sides, there's only so much process we can do tonight for this. We cannot solve Huna Totem, we can't make that decision tonight. But I do like Madam Mayor's idea of having everybody kind of voice what amendments they're thinking would make this ordinance more palatable. And just getting a quick rundown from everybody would probably then we know where everybody else is at, and that might help spur other questions and conversations for the next time that we have this topic in Cal, because we know what each other's kind of thinking. It'll help move us forward.
Okay. Madam Mayor, start us off.
Okay, I would start us off with a navigational study and exactly what I said last time. Madam Attorney, do I need to say anything more?
I do not. I got it.
Okay.
Very good. Mine would also be related to the navigational study. And, I know we have time frames, April 28th or April 7th, depending on our next conversation, will be when we, vote to take action on the lease ordinance. But obviously there's a long time frame after that. I also would like some level of assurance from the Coast Guard that this icebreaker can dock. This project would not prohibit the access they desire downtown. Madam Mayor.
I forgot the other part of that one too. I don't think that should necessarily prohibit if the leases approve them building, but they have to be under the understanding that if the Coast Guard comes and said yes, that they're going to be pulling pilings back up and not continue.
Very good. I was thinking about one about the Seawalk, but I think after what I've learned tonight, I'm actually feeling pretty good. There's the width parameters outlined in the Planning Commission memorandum there. I think we're just going down the line. I'm the next in the line. And then also in terms of the easement being turned over to CBJ, so I feel appeased on the Seawalk. I'm also the chair. Mr. Kelly, any conceptual amendments you wanted to make the assembly aware of?
Well, the mayor kind of threw some cold water on one of my conceptual amendments, but because I was thinking that I would want to provide some sort of direction that any sort of funds that we collect would instead be diverted to the Affordable Housing Fund. And I've seen us use whereases as direction to staff before, and so I was kind of thinking that we could introduce something, or we could have a whereas statement that would, come budget time as part of like the default budget, the city manager would basically include the earnings from the Huna Totem dock as additional funding for the Affordable Housing Fund. But if the rest of the assembly feels like this isn't the right time to do that, or right place or mechanism to do that, then I'm fine waiting until we get to finance with that. I did have another idea that was brought to me during one of the open houses, and I've actually modified this idea a little bit. This person was suggesting that we mandate that only vessels that use clean fuels, like abandoning bunker fuel completely. I thought that might be a little much to mandate, but that's kind of where I was thinking of incentivizing, perhaps, if per ship that doesn't use bunker fuel, or per ship that uses hydrogen or some other cleaner fuel, that maybe they would get a discount off of their monthly lease that maybe they can pass along to their customers, and this might, help incentivize some better behavior. So those were kind of the two um, big ones that I've been mulling. There's a few other ideas I have that I might bring forward in March, but that's where I was thinking.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Hall, any ideas?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like to go ahead. I realize the circulator study is 2 years old, and that was kind of hashed over, and we had no one step up to take that, but I would like to include the flexibility to maybe have that be a stop, and also for non-affiliated cruise businesses' ability to pick up and drop off, explore that option.
Mr. Saniger, anything you'd like to add?
I guess in the spirit of letting others know where we support each other in this to make sure work is done well, I'd like to kind of add in some support for what the mayor mentioned of trying to make sure that we had some terms in there that ensure that this plays well with the icebreaker and that we have that buy-in from the Coast Guard. Otherwise, I think the conditional use permit items regarding like the Seawalk and the stipulations on nearshore power with the 25 feet in 24 months kind of speak to the concerns that I had regarding this. So I don't think I'd have any further amendments.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything at this moment. There's a lot of information we got here tonight that I'm still chewing on, so I can't promise I won't have things in the future. But right now, I'm too full of things to process at the moment.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Definitely, feel like the icebreaker is the big issue out there that still remains a critical piece. So definitely interested in what you all come up with to talk about that or next steps there. I got a few random ideas as we've been talking today, but nothing. I would like to socialize that with our folks one-on-one before bringing it to the body.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing really ready for prime time. Yes, icebreaker. You heard me ask questions about the cost. Potentially interested in playing with that. I can't imagine they'd be letting go of the. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Mr. Bresson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for letting me go last. I don't have a specific amendment, but I did want to say how impressed I was with this group. as I've listened to all of your questions, everybody is really digging in and trying to make sure that we have the right information and we're making the right decisions. And so this has been a really good process this evening to watch everybody and to have everybody come down to the lands to hear what the public had to say. This assembly's putting a lot of effort into coming up with the right decision. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I did want to thank everybody for coming here. We got a lot of man hours into getting to this point, and I really like how everybody's trying to think of just all of the details so nothing's getting overlooked. That's my time, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Bryson. Okay, thanks for that. Madam Mayor.
And you thought I'd be done? No way. I'll keep a couple of them separate that are small, like I would like to see the Seawalk corridor say unobstructed in it, Madam Attorney. But the other big one, and I'm surprised no one else has jumped on this, is right now, if we're over the 16,000 passengers, our docks take the hit. So I would like a condition on their dock that they can't go any higher than the current region ships now. I don't know what that is, so I'll leave that up to Ms. Pierce and Ms. Wright to figure out. So they have a limit there. And then I have a couple more if nobody else has any.
I think people were laying all their cards on the table.
Okay, and then along with Ms. Hall, I am a little concerned. We have trouble with the Jeeps downtown, so I would like to say in writing no rental car facility. Ms. Wall's looking at me strangely. So, and then the last thing, I do know that time is money and everything like that, so this is actually one that hopefully would help them if this makes it through. So, and this will sound weird, so let me get through it and then we'll try to explain it. We as me, myself and I do that all the time, sorry. So I would like some kind of amendment authorizing an amendment once we accept the state tidelands. So in other words, if we pass this lease, it's going to take a while for the state to give us a lease. So I would like to be able to do a lease now if we can, and I guess I can say that because with these conditions, I'm feeling better. And then have an amendment with the lease for the state tidelands, but make sure somehow, Madam Attorney, that they can't go get the state lease without it coming from us, if that makes sense. So in other words, we give them an opportunity to start building without that state lease, because that's totally dependent on the state DNR, and we know how slowly they can move. So that's something else I would look at.
Madam Mayor, on that one, it would allow Hunatoto to begin building in city tidelands before the state tidelands have been
Yes,
transferred.
if the lease was approved, yes, it would allow them to start building ahead of time while we wait for the state with the condition they would have to take hopefully the state will get them to us, but that would allow them to start building.
Very good. Ms. Wright.
Can I just clarify on the portion that they can't go higher than any current Norwegian ship, so that's length and passenger? So we're looking at what is their current capacity and it needs to stay there.
Well, that's why I said we'll have Ms. Pearson, you work that out and come back with something that you think is in my brain.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for working through this with me. I think good to get some things out on the table so we can continue to discuss. I think the next thing we need to decide is schedule. You know where I stand, but anyone propose a motion? Maybe that might just be the quickest, easiest way. Madam Mayor.
I make a motion to keep this in the committee of the whole.
Ms. Wall.
I'll object.
I will as well.
To be clear, I do need another committee of the whole to talk about these amendments. I just don't really care whether I feel like we can introduce it and we can always pull it back if we're not ready, so.
Madam Mayor.
So, and I'm sorry, to the Hunatoto people, because I know this delays you a bit. But the reason I am saying keep it in the committee of the whole, because it's obviously going to be changed. I'm afraid if we introduce it right now, people will say, well, you guys did nothing. The ordinance didn't change at all, and that's not what we're doing. We're going to be working on it and changing it. So that's why I'm saying keep it in the whole, don't introduce it until we iron it out a little bit more and then send it to the public.
Very good.
I'll remove my objection. Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I get it.
My statement on the objection would be that there's a manager's report that would say, you know, the history, where it's going, that is going to come back to the committee of the whole on a certain date for amendments. So I do feel like people could understand that we're going to do more work on it. But Mr. Bryson. We do.
Do both paths, both the mayor's proposed in her amendment and the way that Mr. Smith, doesn't it still get us to the same end assembly?
No, it would not. The mayor's motion, by my understanding, would mean we'll hold in committee, deal with it on March 17th, at which point we could say forward to the assembly for introduction on April 7th, and then up for assembly action on the 28th. My path would be introduced for March 3rd, take amendments on the 17th of March, up for assembly action on April 7th.
I'm going to maintain an objection for this.
Very good. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks. I'll just speak really quickly to that. I appreciate the way the mayor articulated it, and I think that's a better way of being it, or a better way of saying it. I think we, of course, as policymakers, feel pressure. We heard from public testimony. We know what Alaska construction season looks like and the tight timelines. We also know, I forget however many years, whatever the longest amount was, but this has been on our radar for that many years. I will just say that for me, and this is, you know, just a small stupid little vote amongst ourselves, but all of the buildup of those years makes me want to get it right. And people can read. I also think the assembly process is confusing and a lot of people are concerned we're not doing enough. So that would be why I'll vote with the mayor.
Very good. My only comment would just be, you know, we did see this in the Lands, Housing, Economic Development Committee in November, at the COW in December. I appreciate those concerns, but I also feel like we've had a good amount of time to stew. So, and we, of course, will have time to do amendments and then amendments potentially again on April 7th, should people decide. So, Madam Clerk, we have a motion and an objection. Would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the motion to keep this matter in the committee of the whole. Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Mr. Bryson.
No.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson.
Yes.
Ms. Wall.
No.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Hall.
No.
Mr. Steininger.
No.
And Deputy Mayor Smith.
No.
Okay, motion fails, 4 yeas, 5 nays.
Close canvass. Mr. Bryson.
I move that we take the ordinance and introduce it at the next assembly meeting. Ask for unanimous consent.
Mr. Bryson,
I object.
can I make an amendment to your motion?
I was going to say you need to add more to that.
Maybe that would just be up for introduction at the March 3rd meeting, but referred back to the committee of the whole for amendments on March 17th.
That's absolutely what my amendment was, or what my motion was.
It's teamwork.
Yeah.
I'll remove my objection.
Any further objections on the motion? Very good, that motion is adopted. Thanks, everyone. All right. One item down. 3 hours and 23 minutes later.
No, that's been going on since 5 o'clock.
Yeah, let's take a quick 5 real quick. Okay. 8:28. I'll bring the committee of the whole back to order. We're to agenda topic 4, second agenda topic, ordinance 2025-14. I'm going to read the full title to give the clerk a chance to come back to the room. Ordinance 2025-14, an ordinance amending the City and Borough Title 29 relating to election processes and procedures. Sorry, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager, anything you'd like to kick us off with? This ordinance.
I believe the city attorney and the city clerk are prepared to present this ordinance.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Wright, if you'd like.
Sure, I'll start. So we worked with the clerk's office on some legislation regarding elections, and I will have Ms. McEwen go through that. Many of the things are what we would term housekeeping or basic concepts. There are some policy decisions you have to make tonight. I'll flag for you. Moving some things from code into policy and procedure, and that's a policy question you have to make. There are some dates and times that are changing. It gives a little bit more flexibility to people who are running for office, as well as some more flexibility in our petitions and initiatives and regarding signatures. So we'll walk you through each of those. I think it looks like a lot, but it should be fairly straightforward.
Very good. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in your packet on page 56 is the memo regarding the changes in the proposed ordinance. I have had communications with a number of you and had clarifying information that I provided by way of email today. I'm happy to go deep in the weeds, but I know you guys have been here a long night already, and I will be happy to take it at the 30,000-foot level and say, do you have questions about the memo or about the ordinance or things that I can specifically speak to, any concerns that you might have? As Ms. Wright indicated, this is mostly housekeeping. A lot of just generally what we're trying to do with this change is to move some of the things that are in our current code, very specific and redundant in a number of places, language that we could move over into our policies and procedures. I will do a show and tell. Somebody asked, what does the policies and procedures look like? It looks like this big binder, and we rewrite this every single year when it comes to election time. It not only takes the code, then it takes the code and it says, for this part of the code, we're using this form to accomplish this task, whether that's an initiative petition, whether that's the application form for a temporary ballot to be mailed to a temporary address. All of that is put together in the policies and rules of procedure. So since 2001, those policies and rules of procedure have been in code, that we develop those every single election cycle. In 2023, when we rewrote the election code, we actually moved it out of just the definition section of the code and put it into its own code language. And this actually moves it from that code language up to the very beginning and gives it a little bit more clarity and definition as to what that looks like. There are some specific things in the memo, as Ms. Wright mentioned, that are kind of policy decisions. One of those is, in the past, starting in 2001, we had 10 days prior to Election Day to finalize every single policy procedure, and then it was set in stone until after the election was done and over with. In 2023, that moved to a 20-day period. So 20 days prior to Election Day, we had to have this finalized. This particular ordinance is proposing to make that a 40 days prior to election and also to publish it online to provide for more transparency. If you guys want to make changes to that timing, I could go all the way up to 10 days before the election.
let's let her keep going and then.
Okay, so that's one significant change, I suppose you might say. Another is that with respect to the initiative and petitions, as Ms. Wright mentioned, this is taking a lot of the very minutia, this type of address is approved or not approved. As long as we can determine that the person signing the initiative petition is a registered Juneau voter, I don't think it needs to be as prescriptive as is currently written in the initiative referendum petition process. We had to throw out a lot of signatures that we would have accepted their ballots with the information provided, but we couldn't accept their signature on a petition. And so since this is a direct democracy action by our citizens, I don't want that bar to be higher than it would be to be eligible to vote. So that's another part of the policy piece of this ordinance change. And I feel like there's a third one, but I'm having a brain fart and missing out on the other, the timing issue that was brought up. And this is a policy decision by the Assembly. You can decide how you want to do the candidate filing period. This is making the candidate filing period, which has always been a 10-day window. It would open normally on, each of you have a memo, and at the back of it is a, on your desks there. And Mr. Kelly, you should have a copy of that memo in your email as well. And essentially, it's just moving that 10-day window so that there's 5 business days in 1 week and 5 full business days in another week versus not business days. And the reason for that is when we have issues with somebody's nominating petition, we want to give them the opportunity to cure that within that 10-day window. So that was why we were proposing it to be shifted around.
Okay, very good. And Madam Clerk, remind us, this has been introduced, and it would, assuming it, whatever, move from the committee of the whole this evening, it would be up for public hearing and adoption on March 3rd.
That's correct. And the reason for that timing, Mr. Chair, is that in order for it to be in effect when the initiative and referendum period begins at the end of March, beginning of April, it takes 30 days to go into effect once adopted. So if we can adopt whatever changes you want to make to it by the March 3rd timing, that would allow for those changes to be in effect for this upcoming initiative petition cycle.
Very good. We could do questions. I don't know how many. We could start with questions. Any questions for the clerk? Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I understand a lot of the moving code into procedures and then having them online so they're easily accessible. I just was curious. I think everyone here has experienced the city website before. And so I guess, what are your plans to make sure that having it online is in fact more accessible than having it in the binder in the clerk's office?
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson, through the chair. And actually, this is a perfect example, is after this meeting, I'm going to be putting the draft ordinance and all of the materials that I've provided to you on the elections webpage. So each cycle, we have what's coming up with the elections in the future on our clerk/elections webpage. We would continue to do that. We have an FAQ section. We have if you went to our elections page now, you would see the current ordinances in effect and how we do that. We don't have the election policies and procedures online at this time, but that would be part of the implementation of this ordinance, would 40 days prior to election day, publishing those on our elections webpage.
Ms. Atkinson, follow up.
And this is just a clarifying question. If I remember correctly, while we're in sort of the election cycle, there's a lot of press releases that say, here's where you can find information, and go to clerk. Or whatever it is, whatever the website is. So that is something that you release to the public frequently around that time period, correct?
That's correct, Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you.
Ms. Wall. Madam Mayor.
So my question has to do with page 9 and 10 of the ordinance, 68 and 69 of the packet. And I'm looking at subsection B there. So, basically, you're saying the election official has to say, sorry, may provide the election official with a written statement as set forth in election policies and rules and procedures. Well, if I don't know those election policy and rules and procedures, then it makes it more difficult. So why did you put that instead of leaving it like it is right now, which as a candidate was very helpful for me to make my biological information.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor Weldon, essentially all of this language that is in the crossout section that you would have in a candidate statement is what we would put in the rules of procedure. And so you would have all of that where it says the written statement as it is, the form that you guys each had to fill out, that's part of these policies and procedures. And it very much spells out all of those pieces. Does that answer your question?
I'll hop in really quick. I had, I guess just on that, I should find a page. It's that it's removing the neutral party statement from the sample ballot. I'm sorry, let me find you the page. Page 14 of the ordinance, page 73 of the packet. And just want to confirm that the sample ballot will have a neutral statement because it's identical in form to the ballots used in the election, which would have a neutral statement.
So if I might, Mr. Chair, related to this as well as to the initiative petition process, the ballot language has to have the exact text that is being adopted. So the neutral summary or whatever the case might be, by removing that lines 4 through 7 on page 14, what you're doing is you are printing in the sample ballot as well as the official ballot the actual question being considered. Same thing with the initiative petition booklets. It talks about having a neutral summary, but yet it also requires the full text. Because it's either the assembly determining what's going on the ballot with the assembly's approval of ballot language, or it's the initiative committee that is submitting petition language and the exact text needs to be on the ballot. I don't think it's good for the clerk to try and come up with some neutral summary language of what you guys have done or the initiative committee has done. Whatever we're putting on the ballot is what you guys have said is going on the ballot, or in the case of an initiative or referendum, what the initiative committee has proposed. So that's the reason I was suggesting we delete that text from this portion of the ordinance.
Okay, so just to confirm, and I have to admit, I guess there have been neutral party statements on ballot measures, whether they were driven by initiative and in other cases, and then under the change, those would no longer be included.
Through the chair, so the neutral summary that's on the sample ballot is something that the clerk's office and works with the law department to prepare. That is not the pro or con statement that goes in the city manager's voter information pamphlet. That is generally a very redundant, almost it's just about the same exact language at the top, and then you've got the question and you have the exact same language that is being adopted or rescinded. So it's redundant unless, I would think that it's more at the purview of the assembly to decide what you wanted to say on the ballot than the clerk trying to come up with putting words in your mouth.
Okay, I think I might explore. Ms. Wright.
Maybe the attorney might want to weigh in on that one a little bit
Sure.
more.
So we ran into this with the petition last year, and the decision was made to only publish the exact language. So if we started trying to summarize what you were trying to say, or if we tried to come up with a neutral statement, we likely would not be able to do it in a way that would meet what anybody is trying to do. So we thought it was the best case scenario just to write what it is the petition says, or just to write what it is you're asking. So your question, you are correct. In the past, there have been times that there have been neutral statements crafted by the clerks with the assistance of the attorney. We did not do that last year because it was too kind of close to try and come up with a neutral statement, and we didn't want to mess it up. We said it's just better to write exactly what they said.
Okay, I might dig in with you guys a little bit more on that, but other questions? Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about the election officials, the addition of the 16 and 17-year-olds with some limitations. Could you just hit limitations, or maybe help me understand, have we had like very eager 16 and 17-year-olds, or can we not find adults?
Thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Hughes-Candies. This is actually trying to embrace something similar that is done with the State Division of Elections, and they have a youth vote ambassador program, and we don't have this fleshed out in the election policies and procedures yet. However, prior to doing by-mail elections, we worked closely with the high school government classes, and we would have youth who would come and volunteer. They would be sitting right here at the dais. They would take the unofficial results from the precincts over the phone. They were very strictly supervised by election workers. They received school credit for engaging in the democratic process, and it was a great way to engage them in the civic activities of our community. They would also help bring in all of the supplies, check in, and make sure that every single precinct had brought in all of that. Since we've gone to the by-mail elections, we've changed up our policies and procedures, and I didn't want to try and implement something until we had a better grasp on how we do regular by-mail elections. So now that we've had a few under our belt, we're trying to reintroduce this concept of being able to partner with students and involve them in the democratic process without having to make specific election decisions, but assist and be aware and try and participate in the voting process.
Sweet, thank you.
Very good. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. My question has to do with page 2 up at the top. So it says now you have to have them on the city and borough website at least 40 days before an election to expedite the process. It used to be shorter, and I'm not sure where the 40 days came from. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So through the chair, so we set 40 days, so it was shorter because so much has been moved into policies and procedures in this ordinance. We wanted to add additional time in case there were any. I think a question came up. Who does the policies and procedures, and what structure is overseeing the policies and procedures? So if there was any issue at all, we didn't want to be 10 days or 20 days out from an election. We wanted the policies and procedures up so the public could see it, so you could see it, so that if there was a mistake or a challenge or anything, it's happening at 40 days, not 20 days. You could go longer. I would not suggest going shorter. You could go longer.
Follow up? I appreciate that, but it seems like that would be specifically to this election. And after that, I think it kind of binds our hands a little bit. So I would be interested in going shorter, but I don't know how to do that. We can talk later to see how to make that happen. That would happen this one time longer, but I can see why it was shorter. It could be shorter. So anyway, we'll chat later.
If I might just add to that, if we did shorter, I would suggest not doing any shorter than 30 days, only because 30 days is the time frame in which all Juneau voters have to be registered to vote in order to participate in this election. That's also the time frame in which we would have to publish the notice of election. So that's kind of our I won't say kickoff because we're kicking off way earlier in the year, but that's the big time cut in time of now we're fully in election mode and we're mailing ballots out 19 or 18 days prior to the election, depending on whether or not this change goes through. That is one of the timing issues. What we've discovered with by-mail elections is that the state division of elections, we have 30 days, voters have to register to vote, and so that 30-day cutoff prior to election day is where the state then has 5 days after that to update the voter registration rolls for the final roll. And they have until 4:30 on Friday of that week, which happens to be generally the Labor Day weekend week, so it's always got a holiday in there. And it messes with our ability to send the final voter list to our printer. So that's why we're pushing the ballot mail out by 1 extra day, because we haven't been able to successfully receive the voter list from the state earlier. And that kind of messed things up in last year's election a little bit too.
I'm sorry if I may have captured. Did someone have their hand up raised down there at all? No, very good. I had one other thing. Currently, the nominating petition for assembly races or school board starts on a Friday, goes through that weekend, goes through the whole next week, goes through the following weekend, and then ends 4 p.m. or something on Monday. I know sometimes, you'll give an update, typically, I think, Friday evening on who are the, certified candidates or whatever, eligible candidates or something. I know sometimes that leads to some activity over the weekend. I mean, it did for me, I'll say that. So I kind of brought it up and might be interested in floating it, extending it through a weekend and having it, instead of it closing on a Friday, having it close on that following Monday. I mean, people can adjust, but again, sometimes things happen quickly, and having that weekend to do those petitions and signatures, I think it can be, anyway, can be useful. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I agree. I just, as if you suggest something different or if we get there, I do also think that it's worth having some time in that withdrawal period from when people have put in their names and then have a chance to withdraw. I saw the changes here to that. I felt like they were still sufficient, but I do think that's, as a candidate, that's kind of I know I'm not the only one, but when I ran, I was one of those people were like, just put your name in. If a bunch of other people do and you don't want to run against them, you can drop. And so having a bit of time to do that is still good. So if we adjust that, just making sure that we adjust that other period too, would be my concern.
Okay. And as kind of currently written, it's just a full business. It's a full business week after the filing period ends. Like it ends on a Friday, and then the withdrawal period is a week later. Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we're talking about is located on page 7 of the ordinance, and it is section C where it talks about changing the filing period not earlier than 81, changing that to 85 days, and not later than the 71st day, changing to the 74th day. And then essentially what Ms. Wall was talking about, the withdrawal period down under section E, changing that to the 70th day before the election. So what that looks like in actuality, your current code has 81 days. July 18th would be a Friday, and that's the way the current code is written. That would be the opening of the filing period. And the closing of the filing period is Monday, the 28th. That's that 10-day window we talked about. And that does give you 2 weekends in there. However, if you change this to 85 days before Election Day, your opening period would be on Monday, the 14th, and your closing on the 74th day, which is Friday, the 25th. If you wanted to amend that, we could push that closing to the 71st day, which comes out on the Monday, the 28th. So you're opening the filing period on the 14th, you're closing it on 2 Mondays later, the 28th, and then you still have the 67th, if you kept the code as is and didn't make the change under Section E, if you kept it at the 67th day, you would have between that Monday, the 28th, and Friday, August 1st to withdraw. Does that answer the question?
I think it does.
So those would be amendments you would want to make to this code, this ordinance as it was introduced, if that is the will of the body.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, so I had one more, and that's just on, I guess I think that's maybe related to the rules of procedure overall. For instance, I think, there's just a number of strikeouts because it's moving to the rules of procedure. And I'm sorry if you said it earlier. Currently, the assembly doesn't review, we don't review or approve the rules of procedure. Is that
That's correct, Mr. Chair. In the current process, that has not been our practice. That's not to say that if the Assembly wants to approve them by way of resolution or some other mechanism, we're happy to make that happen, up to the will of the body.
okay? No, thanks for that. I guess it is maybe just making sure that, for instance, someone brought up, the official ballot count and the number of ballots voted and spoiled and unused and all that, that very useful report you do. It's being moved to the rules of procedure. Well, a complete ballot statement is outlined in the rules of procedure is how it's written. Anyway, just, you could, and hopefully will eventually retire, but hopefully not in a long time, but you never know who's coming next. So I do wonder about just making sure that, it's good every election. And other questions or potential changes or anything that you want to throw out? I may have some amendments, but people have to. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I move ordinance 2025-14 to the Assembly for public hearing because I understand it's already been introduced.
Very good. Any objections to that motion? Seeing no objection, that motion is adopted. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for your good work here. Okay. 3 other items. Yes, this one should be passed. Madam Manager, Burns Building update.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. So I am requesting today just one more tiny footstep in the direction of moving downtown city office spaces to the Burns Building. If you recall, at the last time we talked about this, you authorized me to hire an attorney to work through a letter of engagement and condo association documents. And you authorized me to get an appraisal done. So the appraisal has come back, and what I'm asking of you today is the authority to enter into negotiations, which means sending the attached letter of engagement to, I suppose the letter of intent is the official title for it, to L&B Corporation, the real estate firm that manages properties for the Permanent Fund Corporation, with the appraised value as our kind of starting place for negotiations. So the appraisal came back at $9.3 million. That's for 2 floors of the Burns Building and the parking lot, about 88 parking spaces. If you recall, it's misstated in the August 5th memo in your packet because in the August 5th memo, we let you know the assessed value of 2 floors of the Burns Building. We did not include the parking spaces. So the parking is worth about $2 million, which means that we assess that property, 2 floors and 88 parking spaces, at $11.02 million. So, the appraisal came in below the assessed value. You also have in your packet a chart just to remind, and not all the assembly members have been through this long debate about how we got to a condo association idea at the Burns Building. But in August, we did a analysis of owning the 2 floors of the Burns Building with, I'll say, a hefty $650,000 annual condo association due, versus renting at $2.85 a square foot. We had started the conversation with them about renting, and it shows a 10-year payback. And that payback reflects a $5.2 million investment in improvements to the 2 floors. We cost estimated at the time a range of improvements. $3.5 million was like carpet floors, furniture, paint, and the $5.25 million was all of those things and moving some walls so that the cubicles would be on the exterior of the floor and the mucky mucks would be in the interior of the floor. If any of you have been to the Permanent Fund Corporation offices, this is how their space is laid out, essentially to make sure that the maximum number of human beings have the maximum amount of light possible. So that's why we use the higher number. We would be advocating for that higher number if and when the purchase goes through. So all I'm asking for you today is for the authority to enter into those negotiations and send this letter to LNB Corporation.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Questions from the Assembly? Cindy, do you have one?
I have a couple. Ms. Kester, so you touched on parking briefly. You said there are 88 parking spaces. I'm trying to remember back, that's significantly less than we are currently giving to city employees today, correct?
About 160 parking permits that we issue to city employees, mostly in the marine parking garage, but also in the downtown transit center. And we are required by our union contract to provide parking. If you recall, when we talked about what to do about parking, because certainly when we talked about Marie Drake as City Hall, parking was even more dire situation. And the reality is we would have to provide parking, additional parking off-site, either at the 450 Whittier site where we were going to build a city hall, that's property that we own, and or the marine parking garage. So definitely still things to figure out to be able to provide. Now we can provide parking. Now can we provide convenient parking for all of our employees? Still working through all of that. Parking is a challenge for most developments in downtown Juneau.
Ms. Atkinson, continue.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, or Mr. Deputy Mayor, oh my God. So the other question, I have a couple more questions actually, sorry. And you guys, I would say it's fair to say that staff have started this process a while ago and at this point have a decent amount of experience under your belt in working with the permanent fund. When you were negotiating on potentially renting, when that was where the direction we were going and that sort of thing. Have you found them to be collaborative, responsive, generally good partners? I think if we're looking at being a condo association, that's a relationship we have to consider. Have your past experience been indicative of a good relationship there?
Just to tab onto the parking issue, because Deputy Manager Barr mentioned, there's also available parking at the Fire Hall and Marie Drake for city employees. But your question was, how has my experience been negotiating with LNB Corporation and or the Permanent Fund? I will say the Permanent Fund staff have been incredibly receptive. Wouldn't surprise me if they're listening to this conversation right now, and useful. And LNB Corporation has also been very good to work with, just quite a bit. It's just slow to engage them, and I think it's probably reflective of what a small asset this building is in the giant portfolio that the Permanent Fund Corporation, real estate portfolio that they manage for the real estate portion of the Permanent Fund.
So I guess in your opinion, would you see becoming a condo association changing circumstances? It'll still be a relative, even smaller portion of their portfolio at that point. Do you see that relationship becoming more responsive in the future?
Well, certainly we would be the managing partner because we would own the majority of the facility. I mean, it all matters in the terms and conditions that you negotiate in the condo association agreement. Also, our proposal would be that our building maintenance would do maintenance for the entire facility. We've got an excellent building maintenance crew. So, I mean, I think that most of our interaction would likely be with the permanent fund staff and corporation staff and their kind of individual needs. And I think some of those bigger questions could be really clearly spelled out in those condo association documents.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you. So on this memo, you talk about the combined CIPs for new City Hall and the City Hall being 14.5 million and, having a general high-end cost of 14.55 million if we go through with this. But just to clarify, that's if we are able to get a purchase agreement at the 9.3 million, not if they hold to, in the past, the number of around 12 million. Is that correct?
You are correct. So 12 plus 5.25 is 17.25 minus 14.5. I would be asking you for just short of $3 million to kind of execute the plan as we envision it. Of course, the assembly could always say, no, we want to do a lower level of improvements to the facility.
Another issue being if the permanent fund does hold to their $12 million number being significantly higher than the assessed value, what does the process look like for buying something as the city at a significantly higher than that assessed value? Is there things we have to waive or special rules we have to? I'm just curious about what that process
Yeah,
looks
so
like.
we would have to make a finding that it's in our best interest to pay above appraised value for the property.
I guess my last question is when we have talked in the past, I think a big reason I think a few members have been moving this forward has been that there is no or hasn't been a really viable option, right? Marie Drake, you mentioned, didn't have the parking we needed, and then we discovered some other issues with Marie Drake. Do you still feel that there are no other viable options and that this is, in our current climate, the only option moving forward?
I feel like it is in the best interest for two things. It is in the best interest for city employees to be co-located as much as possible. I can't tell you how nice it's been just to have Dan and Angie in the same building. We did a shuffle. Their IT employees at the Fish House were really spread out all over the borough right now. And so I think there's a lot of efficiency and collaboration that we can't even tell for everyone to be in the same building. I also really believe that the city is going to be in business forever, and so that we should own our facilities. So I do not have a lead on any other facility that's the size that we would need to co-locate most of our downtown employees that we could own.
Ms. Atkinson.
I guess in that case, has there been any movement on another option for leasing that would be big enough for co-location? Because I agree that's very important. This owning is a relatively recent turn that we've taken. We had looked at leasing in the past. So is there another viable option that's come up in the interim for leasing a facility that's big enough for co-location?
I have had no formal proposals from anyone, nor have we solicited any.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Atkinson. There's quite a few great questions there, some of which I had myself, so I appreciate that. I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing today. It's to me a problem, not a you guys problem. But I just wanted to did I hear correctly that the 9.3 million appraised value does include the 88 parking spaces?
Correct. It does include the parking, 2/3 of the parking lot.
Thank you. I do have more questions if there's no one else in the queue.
Ms. Hall, did you have a follow-up? Ms. Hall.
Just to clarify, I thought you said it was an additional 2 million. So instead of 9.3, it was more like 11.2?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to clarify. I think the confusion lies in the difference between the appraised value that the appraiser gave us that we hired. That is $9.3 million for the 2 floors and the 88 parking spaces. The assessed value, which is the value that our own assessors value and tax that property at, is 11.02.
Mr. Bryson?
I don't necessarily have a question. Mr. Smith, I had some clarification as I was part of this conversation way long ago. I kind of feel like this is Plan D. Like we went down, we tried Plan A, we didn't do it. We tried Plan B, we're looking at. And so we kind of set the groundwork for this because we couldn't do what Plan A was, we couldn't do Plan B. And so we talked about all of these different options, and the survey that that the city or that the citizens filled out for us, they wanted long-term. They wanted us to have something that was like one of their highest things, something that's going to last and be around for a while, so that we weren't having to evaluate this. That was like the number one thing, was they wanted it to be a very long term, and the only way to do something for long term and be in business forever is to own it. It's just in the city's best interest. It's in our taxpayers' best interest. Owning is the right way to go for being in business forever. But this was all part of the Public Works and Facilities discussion that got us to like taking a ballot initiative to the voters. This part of it was also part of that. The discussing how we were, well, like, what if we don't do this? What would this look like? What would it look like to go into a school? What would it look like to take one of the city buildings downtown? My prediction was, if we don't pass this vote, or if the bond failed, I promised one of those city government offices was going to raise their hand and say, we have room for you. And that's exactly what happened. And that's how we got to this spot right here. So just a little history lesson from the 3 years that we spent on it. Madam Director, or Madam Mayor, thank you for the time, Mr.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Seeing no further questions, Madam Mayor, did you have a motion?
I do. I request that I move that the Committee of the Whole provide a motion of support to enter into negotiations with the Alaska Permanent Fund Corp. For the purchase of 2 floors of the Burns Building.
Ms. Atkinson?
I'm gonna object to that motion. I think I've talked a few times to this body about my concerns with this permanent change, just state space at a time where we're actively fighting capital creep and a potential capital move. So I'm not gonna retread that ground too much, but I do want to say I don't disagree that owning is our best. I think it's our fiscally responsible option. I think it's best for our city employees, and that's not why I have such a problem with this proposal. I have an issue with owning this building with this mechanism, with this partner. And, you know, I recognize that it might be our only option at this time. I maintain that, you know, taking this move now, we could have different options in the future, and this is a permanent change that I think is not ideal, but it might be our only option right now, but it is, I think, a bad one. And there's a lot of issues that I think we've outlined here today, in addition to my concerns with the state space. I have a lot of concerns about being a condo association with the permanent fund. I don't like that they're going to probably insist on $3 million more than the appraised value. I don't like that there's not enough parking. I just don't have a better option. So I recognize that that is where we're at, but I will maintain my objection on this one.
Good. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. My objection is mainly to the price differential between the appraised 9.3 and their offer of $12 million. I guess I'm more objecting to make a comment. I think I'll be removing my objection, so that way the manager is empowered to negotiate. But if we can't, I think this gives us leverage to either get the price lowered down or to get some sort of other concessions. I really do want to see a quality space for our workers, but I also want to see our city and our taxpayers get the best deal possible. And so I have some ideas that I'll probably share offline with the manager. And with that, I remove my objection.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And of course, before we actually agree or spend any money, that would come back to the assembly for a vote. Any further comments on the motion or the objection? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, there's a motion and there's an objection. Would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the motion to move this forward for the purchase of 2 floors of the burn building. Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Mr. Steininger,
Yes.
Ms. Hall, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Wall,
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson,
No.
Ms. Hughes Candies, Mr. Bryson,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And members of the Assembly. Moving on, Marie Drake options, agenda item 6, Madam Manager.
Thank you. What I am asking for you today is to move forward with introducing an appropriation to do some basically more public outreach, more investigation, more cost estimating on option of demoing a portion of Marie Drake. And so this, just to kind of step back a little bit, we started the conversation with like what to do with Marie Drake and Floyd Dryden, what public uses could we have in there. We had a lot more interest in Floyd Dryden than Marie Drake. Had some interest in Marie Drake. We looked at using it for City Hall. All that kind of moved forward, and then it was a little bit brought to a grinding halt when we realized that there were some HVAC issues with the classroom wing of the building that, with an asbestos, and the school district kind of had been like hanging on with, not doing the maintenance that they needed to do on that HVAC system and ducting. Because they knew that there would be a potential for disturbing asbestos. We went in there, did the testing. Sure enough, no airborne asbestos. So there's no asbestos in like the air that people were breathing. But the contractor was basically like, "You touch this, you're going to have to fully abate it." So right now we can't even go in and fix the HVAC system, and it's like that kind of broken. So like that. That's because my dad was a mechanic. He's always like, "What's it sound like?" So that's kind of the history and why we are here. So the Public Works and Facilities Committee discussed in December options for demoing and kind of moving forward with Marie Drake. I appreciate that the thought of demoing a school is very difficult. In fact, I'm not sure in the history of humankind if anyone has ever successfully demoed a school, because there's a lot of emotion and just a lot of utility in that space. However, the Public Works and Facilities Committee recommended looking at demoing 80% of the classroom wing, so that's the wing that has the asbestos issues, leaving a couple of those classrooms and remediating them, and retaining the gym and the planetarium and the shop space. And what that would allow you to do is to move building maintenance from the jumbo facility. Speaking of another school that could be demoed, it would allow building maintenance to move to that facility, be more centrally located, and that site has been, that facility is in ill repair, and that site's been identified as a potential place that the community could pursue housing, that the assembly could develop housing. So it would be a good move for our facilities maintenance. So that's kind of a pro of that option. Of course, maintaining the gym, which has been abated, has been definitely a desire. That was the number one priority from the community and the assembly when they heard that, and it also retains the planetarium. So it's kind of the way to maintain the space that has the most utility, It would demo and provide 93 parking spaces. You heard that we do need parking spaces for City Hall if it moves to the Mearns Building. We also need parking spaces for JD. That is another need that has been demonstrated. Of course, the downside to that is a large price tag. Really, there's no version of demoing that doesn't have a large price tag. That total project cost is $10.2 million. So, what I would like is just the buy-in from the assembly to continue looking at and doing some public outreach on what this could look like. And I want to clarify that my motion, my requested action is $150,000 for public outreach and 35% design. And my architecture staff woke up in the middle of the night and said, what was I thinking, 35% design? I meant schematic design. So let me just clarify that we would not be able to get to 35% design with that amount of funds. What we would be able to do is something similar to the first phase of outreach that we did with Capital Civic Center. If you recall, the kind of, when I was engineering and public works director and we had the multiple stakeholder meetings and we had 3D imaging and some of the stuff that you've seen recently. So it would be an opportunity to do a lot of that engagement, come up with better cost estimates, come up with some better visioning. So that is what I am asking from you this evening.
Thank you, Manager Kester. Questions from the Assembly. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Manager Kester, did I hear that you said that one of the options would be moving maintenance from the Douglas location to Marie Drake location?
Yes, staff considers that a pro of preserving the shop space at Marine Drake.
Does that include like all of their warehouse and their parts supply? So like all of Parks and Rec maintenance would, okay, so that's the largest savings that I've heard this group say in weeks. Parks and Rec and all the maintenance starts in Jumbo. All of the Parks and Rec stuff is like their light bulbs and their maintenance stuff is building maintenance. That's what Parks and Rec building maintenance is part of that. Sorry. But they are so far out, they're in the worst location. Moving them to Marie Drake, just the labor alone that we would save for every building or every maintenance task that ever happens would be more cost effective because they're not driving all the way to the end of Douglas every time they need to do a new project or get another part. Yes, thank you for that. That is a very big deal. Because if you ask those maintenance guys, they'd want to move to a better location as well. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Wall.
Thank you. I have kind of accidentally missed most of this discussion so far, so I'm sure this number is somewhere, if not here, then in another memo. What is the do nothing cost and option here? Just, let it sit.
Yeah, so we're spending probably $450,000 right now on heating, maintaining the current facility. I don't know that we would save a ton of money by demoing half the facility because we would still be using over half of the facility. So, the do nothing option is also just a risk. I mean, like we can't touch that side of the building until we remediate it and we have a heating system that's failing. So eventually we'll have to, invest some funds in it to keep it in warm status. So I don't have it's not like I can say, we're going to save $500,000 on heating once we close that down because we plan on actually repurposing a big portion of the facility. But I have when that HVAC just doesn't work anymore, I'm going to be like, well, now half the building's freezing. There's separate systems. So the system, the half of the building where the gym is and everything is on a different system. So I'm sorry I don't have a better, more compelling answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then they'll be so excited to be like City Hall, join the club of being run by two HVACs. Could you remind me, when we looked at this, I wasn't able to go back and look at the public works and facilities. We had the options laid out and the numbers there. How the $10 million relates to the cost of abatement of dealing with the HVAC, touching it and then doing full abatement to the building.
So let's see, in the memo, we have a chart that talks about, no, sorry, I don't think your question is in here. We have a chart that gives you 4 different options. Now, gut building to structure and renovate is the kind of most, that's the best option, and that's a very large price tag. $75 million is the price tag on that particular option. So your question is, what would it be just to abate?
What we need to abate.
Yeah, I had that too, and if you give us a minute, I think Deputy Manager Barr's pulled that memo up. Thank you. So in the memo from December 2nd, it talks about the minimum abatement required to enable the HVAC system to be maintained, and that is $2.8 million. Right, does that sound like?
So 25% of the cost to knock it down. Okay, thanks.
And then that memo talks about the cost of tenant improvements in the context of the proposed space, which, if you remember, was childcare, and that added a price tag of brought it to $7.2 million. Of course, that reflects tenant improvements for a specific use.
Great, thank you for digging out those numbers.
Very good. Further questions from the body? Ms. Hall.
And I'm in favor of, continuing to study it. However, I would like to comment on the functional impacts where, freeing up the multipurpose wing could be used to relocate CBJ and JSD storage from Thane Warehouse, thereby creating more space needed for the warming shelter and potentially care sobering center. And having been someone that's been going there fairly regularly, it is such an inconvenient location for definitely the cold weather shelter. And I know you guys have searched mightily to find an appropriate place, but it's not on a bus line. It requires multiple trips through town to pick up folks, and yeah, we're putting folks in a warehouse. And although, yeah, so I would say the location of that, I don't see that as being a plus for the functional impact. I see that, and again, with the care sobering center, that's pretty far removed from where folks need that service. Maybe going back to rainforest recovery area might be a good potential solution for that. Thank you.
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Ms. Hall, for that question, and through the mayor. Yes, finding a location, finding a suitable location for the sobering center has been a big struggle for us. It's currently housed in St. Vincent de Paul. We're grateful for their willingness to house it there, but the space is very challenging, not suitable for really either the clients or the staff. In considering other locations, Ms. Hall noted that the two that kind of rise to the top, and that is potentially repurposing another portion of the Thane warehouse or potentially the hospital. We've had very preliminary conversations with the hospital, and so far not a lot of interest, but very preliminary. So looking forward to continuing those conversations and eventually bringing you that topic in committee.
Ms. Hughes-Gandes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have comments or thoughts that maybe, let me know when it's a good time.
Actually, I have one question.
Yeah.
And just to confirm, it's probably pretty clear. The funding, the public outreach is just to talk about option 3. Is that right? Just essentially talking about Or is it gonna be, is it broader than that?
I think the direction we would point in would be option 3, and that's how we would organize our outreach. You can't talk about, it's like you always have to talk about the do nothing option. So certainly I expect that there would be all kinds of like, well, what if you did this? What if you did that? But it would be very helpful to have that like refinement of scope and anchoring it around option 3.
Seeing no further questions, Ms. Euskandis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad that we're talking about this now as a whole body. I think aside from, Manager Custer talked about, no one loves demoing a school, or that maybe has emotional connotations for people. This, from a fiscal standpoint and just an operational standpoint, just doesn't make sense to me as presented as our best option. If we can abate it for that cost and we can do upgrades for that cost, and these are just rough, guesses at this point, we'd have to dial those numbers in. Having a building that we could use for childcare, which has been a top priority for ours and something that we know we need in the community, that is way more attractive for me to introduce an ordinance for and to try to get schematic design for, to get an accurate cost estimate, than to spend that much money to get a cost estimate for knocking down some of a building. I know that we do have to get ahead of this. The poor school district is forced to not do their maintenance, so it's not like that would have gone on indefinitely, but until recently, we had 300 kids in this building, so it's hard for me to believe that the best option is to get working on the destruction of the building. I would just be interested in knowing more about if there are reasons why that abatement is not the right direction to go for the continued use of the building. When we need buildings for things like childcare, then there might be data there that I'm not seeing, that the staff would bring to us. But right now, I'm not seeing it, so I have a hard time wanting to socialize this idea and spend money on it. So those are my initial thoughts.
Any response to that? I feel like parking is an issue, but Manager Custer.
Only thing I would say is we really do need funding to be able to do anything, because at this point we've a little bit been poaching from the City Hall CIP, which, was reasonable when we were talking about it becoming City Hall, but no longer is. So the decision doesn't have to be made tonight, but there does need to be some funding put behind some further study if that's the direction that the Assembly wants to go.
Mr. Kelly, a question. Mr. Kelly.
Yes, I do have a question. So these proposals, what I see here is that they do open up parking options, and like we just got an email today from a constituent, kind of about the parking issue there, and so I guess my question is, how are high school students currently coping with the parking situation there? Has anything improved? Or is there still a need for a lot more parking in that area?
Anyone have any?
Yeah. So I will recall back when we had I think in the middle of flooding of Mendenhall Valley, the parking apocalypse of 2024, when some high school students got ticketed their parking on Glacier Highway. And I will say that DOT has installed different signage there to allow for some additional parking. I know Docks and Harbors has allowed for some additional parking. I know that they're parking in the neighborhood, which I'm sure has an impact on the neighbors. And UAS, Mayor has reminded me that UAS has also worked to allow some additional parking. I mean, parking is, kind of like horizontal space. And, when you have a desk, it just like gets covered. There's always going to be more need. And so I think Superintendent Hauser would say there's definitely a need for additional parking for students.
Thank you.
Mayor Walden, did you have a comment or question? Mr. Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Sentiment trumps strategy is the first political rule I learned when I went to AML. Sentiment is what's keeping Marie Drake around. Sentiment is what kept the Augustus Brown pool around. $8 million, $1 million a year subsidy. If we are being fiscally responsible, keeping old buildings because of it could possibly be childcare, we didn't want to lose the planetarium, that is costing us more money. Keeping an old building instead of moving Juneau forward with the appropriate parking that we need, moving City Hall over here, trying to keep things the same is going to cost us more in the long run than if we bite the bullet and make these historic changes right now. I totally get it. Marie Drake has a very special place in people's hearts. Mount Jumbo Gym in that school at one time had people's hearts. It costs us more to keep it open than the community is getting the benefit of. And that is absolutely the case with Marie Drake right now because of that closed wing and the abatement. If we wanted to dump money into sentiment, we'd be pouring good money into bad to fix a bad building up. We have better directions that we can go in, trying to keep every building that has a special place in our heart is not a fiscally responsible approach because it's going to cost us more money in the long run. So if we're talking about money, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Ms. Hall.
Just a brief comment on the suggestion for childcare. You know, I worked as a school nurse in that building, so, you know, there were two alternative schools housed there, plus the Homebridge. And so that, turn myself off, a very large space for childcare. And to me, it would make more sense to have the 3 and up somehow housed more in the school, expand neighborhood schools, well, as enrollment drops, if it does, to expand the preschool programs in neighborhood schools. And then, you know, I just don't think we need 2 classroom, you know, 2 floors of that building for the 0 to 3 crowd. So plus Floyd Dryden. I think childcare is probably better done in smaller centers versus big mega centers. So just my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Seeing no further questions or comments, Madam Mayor.
I'll try a motion. So I move we introduce an ordinance for $150,000 to fund public outreach and schematic design to develop more accurate cost estimates on both the option 3 presented today and the abatement option that Ms. Hughes Candies was looking at. Does that work, Madam Manager?
Thank you. Madam Mayor, will you remind me the amount?
You have 150,000.
I do. Okay, thank you.
Very good. We've heard the motion. Any objections, Ms. Wall?
Thank you. I'll object just because it feels like every time we talk about space, things have changed, needs have changed, and I really appreciate staff are trying to find solutions to all of our problems, and we have a lot of priorities and problems right now, and we don't have $10 million, and I realize that at some point we're gonna have to make decisions, but I would rather wait before we spend money or use our social capital with the public until things have settled out a bit, or we have other space in our schedule to make these big decisions with eventual big money behind them. So I'll object.
Very good. Further comments, Ms. Atkinson.
Just objecting for a question of the manager. If we're appropriating, or we're giving you the option to do the amount of money in the motion, but with an extra option added, is that sufficient funds to explore both of those options?
I mean, you would just get a lower level of cost estimating and visioning. I mean, we will do our, I mean, I think we would be able to spend some amount of money that's not ridiculous and bring you back another conversation. That is what I would expect. I know that's not very scientific, but like, I'm not gonna spend $150,000 before the next cow and be like, okay, guys, spend all your money. Here's what we got.
All right, thank you. I'll remove my objection.
Very good. Seeing no other comments, there's a motion and objection. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the motion to introduce an ordinance for up to 150 or 150,000? 150,000 for public outreach and schematic design. Mayor Weldon?
Yes.
Mr. Bryson?
Yes.
Ms. Hughes Scandies?
Yes.
Ms. Wall?
No.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Theininger?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Our last item, still 20 minutes before 10, folks. We have ordinance 2025-20, tax exemption spanning multiple construction seasons. Mr. Barr, I believe this is you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This one is maybe your simplest one of the night. You have tax exemption code for economic development projects in Title 69 of the code, Chapter 69 of the code. There are 3 categories where developers can qualify for tax exemption status. The issue before you tonight is that one of the developers, Torrey Pines, developed a senior living center out in the valley. Had a construction season that spanned multiple calendar years that they weren't originally expecting to have span multiple calendar years. So had their construction schedule stayed on schedule, they would have had their first year of that 12-year tax abatement begin in calendar year 2023. Because the building wasn't completed until sometime in calendar year 2023, tax abatement could not start until calendar year 2024. They would like that first year of tax abatement to begin in 2023 when their building was not fully constructed rather than 2024. Staff, the code is clear that staff does not have the flexibility to do that. The amendment that you see in ordinance 2025-20 would give the assessor the flexibility to retroactively approve tax abatements to start in a calendar year when a building was still under construction, but key retroactively. So as long as the building was still completed, as long as it is still accomplishing its intended purposes. And the developer would have to agree to that, right? So it's a kind of a joint decision in this very specific circumstance. Hopefully that's clear, but I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions from the assembly? I had one. What? I didn't make any promises. So if this ordinance were to pass, so could this be retroactively applied to the current receiver of tax abatement? I guess that's
Yes.
very good. And so if it does apply, and they would like it to be done, and the assessor can make that change, do we issue them a refund?
In the event that they had paid, we would, but they have not paid.
Okay. Thanks. That was my only question. Other questions? Ms. Wall?
This made me pause the memo because you mentioned that, we've got one project eligible and a few others on the way. We know about the ones that we have been involved in by providing funding. I feel like I have seen some other units go up around town that would meet the bill. Maybe I'm wrong. Is it do we know, are there people not taking advantage of this program because they don't know about it? Not that I want to give them back all their money, but I would like to know that people building properties know that this is out there. So is this, do we know any of that?
Mr. Barr.
Thank you for that question through the deputy mayor. We don't. I assume I'll ask that question of our CDD staff, and if I learn anything more, then just we don't know, I can get back to you.
Good. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I guess it kind of raises an interesting issue for me. I'm kind of wondering, so if we're giving somebody a refund for a payment they already had due or in I guess in other cases that may happen in the future, a refund for a payment they've made. Does this mean like we're effectively changing retroactively our approved, like, does this affect like any approved budgets or any other assembly action for prior year?
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, through the chair. Mr. Kelly, this is a good question. It would reflect somewhat decreased property tax received in that calendar year. I think that's all I have to note on that, although if you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to try to tackle that.
No, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Uscandy.
Just to add on to that, I was going to say, interestingly enough, everywhere that has a tax abatement ordinance like ours, they're not being taken advantage of statewide at the rates that you would expect them to.
Does no one want free money anymore? Madam Mayor.
Yes. First, a little comment. Some people don't want to adhere to the conditions of the tax abatement, so that's why they're looking for it. Anyway, I move ordinance 2025-20 to the full assembly and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, that motion is adopted. Okay. We are through our agenda topics. Any staff reports?
No. Oh, sorry, I don't have it.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This briefly got mentioned during the ordinance on the elections, and yes, I have formally given my letter of retirement to the city manager as of last week, and I will be ending my employment with CBJ and public service in this capacity as of June 30th of 2025. So I just wanted to spin off on what you previously said and make it officially known to the assembly that I have thoroughly enjoyed being a public servant, but yes, there will be amazing clerks coming behind me to take up elections in my place.
I know. Wait, you didn't, I know. Madam Clerk, you didn't write that after I said that, did you? I know. Like, oh, good idea. Well, we're happy for you, but sad for everyone else.
It has been a true pleasure and honor to serve with 25 years worth of assemblies now, so, and 30 years of public service. So when I do give my real farewell, you'll get to hear a lot more about it.
Okay, well, ending on that note, nothing else before the assembly, committee of the whole.
Under next meeting date, I just would like to let the body know that we are looking at shifting the April 21st committee of the whole, possibly doing a committee of the whole in lieu of the April 28th meeting, especially now that you did, especially if you don't end up having a very big item on that agenda. So I just wanted to let you know that the clerk will be reaching out to you with some dates and maneuvering on the April committee of the whole meeting.
Very good. Thank you. Seeing nothing else before the committee of the whole, our next meeting is March 17th, 2025. We're adjourned.